Hello, this is Half-Life 2, Direct 3D9. Oh, it reset everything. It just casually reset everything. Okay, that's funny. Okay. Um, just give me a second. Let me join to the chat. Book connected. So Half-Life 2 is apparently 20 years old. I like these games, so I guess I'm gonna stream it. And hopefully I can finish it today. They're just a big marathon of Half-Life 2. But then again, I shouldn't be playing on hard. Fuck hard, you know? Whatever. Sure. Sure, whatever.
Rise and shine, Mr. Freeman. Rise and shine. Not that I wish to imply you have been sleeping on the job. No one is more deserving of a rest, and all the effort in the world would have gone to waste until... Well, let's just say your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes.
I didn't see you.
Valve.
This is my third transfer this year.
I'm Gabe Newell, and welcome back to Half-Life 2. It's been a long 20 years since its release. In this anniversary update, we've tried to respond to as many of the community's requests as possible. And while this might not be the absolute #1 request from fans, I often hear how much people would like a commentary mode, so we're excited to finally make that happen. Not only was it a challenge to remember many of the details of Half-Life 2's development, but it's not easy to crack open decades-old computer code and wonder what the hell you were thinking way back then. Along with the dev commentary, we've cleaned up a bunch of old bugs and tried to leave things in better shape than we found them. And at least this time, we had the luxury of knowing how things turned out in the end. To listen to a commentary node, put your crosshair over the floating commentary symbol and press your use key. To stop a commentary node, put your crosshair over the rotating node and press the use key again. And please let me know what you think. You can reach me at gaben@valvesoftware.com. Thanks, and have fun.
Physics objects. It might be hard to remember it now, but back when Half-Life 2 came out, small objects in games, like these bits of trash, were usually static, as in they didn't really move, or if they did, it was in a very simple way. If you were lucky, they might break apart into some sprites if you hit them. One of the goals for this initial train station section was to really make it clear to players that these kinds of things were properly, physically, actually being simulated in Half-Life 2. They could be picked up, dropped, thrown, broken, moved by other forces, you name it. Here we're starting with just a small thing, showing that trash is being blown by the arrival of the train, or, more specifically, an invisible volume that's triggered by the player leaving the train.
Train station. The beginning of a Half-Life game has a big job to do. We have to introduce players to a new world while teaching them how to interact with it. Players need to quickly grasp what's happening, who the key players are, what threats they face, and how they fit into it all. Above all else, it has to be as fun and interactive as possible. Nailing this takes a lot of iteration and playtesting, especially on the small moments that make up a bigger picture of the game. In this section, we'll highlight some key moments, game design problems, and a few playtests where things didn't quite go as planned.
Welcome. Welcome to City 17. You have chosen or been chosen to relocate to the finest remaining urban center.
There's a lot on these maps, though.
Metro cop shoving citizens. We've only walked a few feet and we're already got problems to solve. We're introducing the Metro Cop, an enemy that eventually we're going to ask players to kill, and giving you a glimpse of the world they're stepping into. It's a simple, clear moment that shows the relationships between the Metro Cops and citizens, and by extension, the player. At the same time, we decided to reinforce the existence of the core physics simulation, showing the way in which NPCs can casually interact with objects in the world. Seeing something like a suitcase knock into another and dislodge was pretty novel back then. These moments at the train station...
Wait a second, I still have the winter mod installed, I think.
Goals were the most successful. They felt natural, like the game wasn't pausing just to teach you a lesson.
There's no way, right, that I still have that installed.
Sweeping Vortigern. Another key moment of storytelling, and another...
I mean, why is there will be snow here?
Here, we're showing how Vortigerns fit into this new world, which is a big shift from their Half-Life 1 role as enemies.
I might have to uninstall this.
Train station. The Sweeping Vortigern came from our constant hunt for ways to show characters interacting naturally with the physics system. Why just tell players Vortigerns are friendly now, when you can show one casually sweeping the floor and knocking around some simulated objects? Nothing signals, hey, don't shoot me this time around, like someone willing to tidy up.
And so, whether you are here to stay or passing through on your way unknown, welcome.
Were you the only ones on that
17.
train?
It's safer here.
Citizens. When it came time to design the human citizens of City 17 and the world outside the city, we chose to include a variety of races, ages, and genders. This not only provided narrative context for the Combine's enslavement of all of humanity, but it was also important to us that anyone playing the game could see themselves represented in the Resistance, with everyone on Earth united against the Combine. While we found a number of candidates to use as reference in creating these citizens through our daily lives and connections, we ultimately resorted to advertising in the Seattle Times classifieds to reach the desired range of faces that we'd envisioned. Natural storytelling. To achieve our world-building and storytelling goals throughout the train station, we needed a natural way to deliver dialogue without it feeling too gamey or requiring tutorials. We noticed players often approached NPCs to get a closer look, so we turned that into an opportunity for the NPCs to acknowledge the player and deliver their lines. This kept interactions low-key, which was essential since the citizens aren't exactly too
Low-key.
cheerful or lively. The simplicity of this approach also aligned with one of Half-Life's core storytelling goals, making the narrative responsive to the player's interest. Some players want to dig into every detail, while others just want to know what to do next. Giving players control over how much story they want to engage with, without it blocking progress, is a goal we always try to maintain in a Half-Life game. Plus, the less complicated a feature is to implement, the more of it we can include.
Early tech planning. Shipping the game always teaches us a lot. We finally get to find out which choices we made were good ones, and which were ones we should do differently next time. So after Half-Life 1, when we sat down to start thinking about what kind of sequel we could build, we had all kinds of player feedback to digest. From it, we tried to build a master list of things that Half-Life 2 was going to focus on. We didn't try to design a specific player experience. Instead, we found it more useful to approach the question from a technological standpoint. Black Mesa's security guards and scientists had worked well. What could we do if we pushed it really, really hard on characters? We liked our interactive storytelling. What could we build that would allow us to do even more of it, and a greater variety? The exploration and interaction with the Black Mesa was compelling to players. Maybe a physics system would allow us to take that further. In all these areas, we tried to imagine the best version of it could look like years in the future, and back solve from that a set of technological steps that might get us there.
Chosen or been chosen to relocate to one of our finest remaining urban centers.
Storytelling. Creating a sense of immersion was a core principle in our approach to Half-Life 1's storytelling, and it led us to the self-imposed constraints of never, or at least very rarely, taking control away from the player and of keeping the player's avatar silent. These limitations made storytelling more challenging at times, but we felt it was important to stay with them for Half-Life 2. Our hope was that by maintaining the
I have the winter mod
we
installed.
push ourselves to
I'm gonna
explore
have to
more interactive
uninstall the entirety of Half-Life 2.
Characters. In Half-Life 1, security guards and scientists could best be described as archetypes, not individuals. They were abstractions of characters that matched the visual fidelity we had achieved at the time. But as our technology improved, Half-Life 2, we saw an opportunity to move beyond abstractions. The increased visual fidelity of the character models, combined with improvements in animation, made us believe we could focus on creating individual characters, people you would actually care about. We allowed ourselves to write real dialogue and have characters deliver it in a way that felt realistic enough so players did not think about them as pawns in a video game, and hopefully propel our narrative forward. In 2001, a couple of years into development, we were energized by Japan Studios' Eco. Directed by an animator, it blew us away with its reliance on characters as the key connection with the player, giving us the courage to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, you and me both, Doc. He was about to board the express to Nova Prospect.
Well, Barney, what do you intend?
I'm thinking.
Alex is around here somewhere. She would have a better idea how to get in here.
Oh, as long as he stays away from checkpoints, we should be okay. Listen, I gotta go, Doc. We're taking enough chances as it is.
Very well. And, Gordon, good to see you.
Okay, Gordon. You're gonna have to make your own way to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Oh, man, that's what I was afraid of. Get in here, Gordon, before you blow my cover.
Blocking tutorials. At times, we need to be certain the player has learned something, and the standard method, at least in game development, not in life, is to trap them behind a gate of some kind, where the player must demonstrate their knowledge to be able to continue. We try to disguise these gates as something natural, so it doesn't feel like the game has come to a halt. Of course, time, resources, or the environmental context itself can make that tricky. In this case, we needed to teach the players how to move objects, so a simple stacking puzzle seemed like the best solution. We tested more complex designs, but they ended up being less effective at teaching the actual thing we needed the player to learn.
Blocking tutorials too.
There are two failures of note in this tutorial. First, players can break
Yeah, I still have the winter mod installed. Fuck me.
Great. This leaves them stuck on which we consider a game-stopping bug that must be fixed. A clean solution would have been to tweak the window or crate sizes so that the player could fit through but not the crates. The problem was that we really only caught this problem late in development, and making even a simple change like that can have unpredictable game-breaking consequences, and right before launch no less. Also, this issue was purely theoretical. We've never actually seen players do it. Our playtest of the design space had gone smoothly, with players learning what they needed and moving on. So changing the room's design this late in the game could have disrupted that success in ways that we couldn't foresee, so we opted for a more conservative fix rather than something elegant. If you're curious, try tossing all the boxes out the window and see what happens.
Blocking Tutorials 3. The second failure in this tutorial space is a case of misteaching, where we accidentally teach the players something we didn't intend. This can be hard to avoid without extensive playtesting, since the game is always teaching, even when it's not by design. We cover a more extreme example of this later in Train Station. Some cases of misteaching are critical to fix, like if the player learns the wrong way to use a weapon or interact with a common element of the game. But this one was more subtle. While teaching players to move objects, we also taught them to stack physics objects to escape a space. Normally that's fine, except we don't deploy that puzzle later in the game, and teaching something irrelevant just clutters up their mental toolkit and makes it harder to readily keep useful things in mind later on. Worse, stacking objects to escape the play space become a problem later on, something we had to actively prevent in multiple areas. With so many
should I leave the snow?
in the game,
I'm not like visually there was anything changed within the game.
In the end, we hoped players wouldn't overthink this early lesson, and when playtests showed players getting stuck later on, we made sure not to remind them of it.
Fall damage. Teaching players how to do things is an essential thing for the game to do. But for them to make confident decisions, they also need to understand the more subtle rules. This small moment covers two of those. First, it shows how far the player can fall without taking damage. Second, it introduces a bit of the game's vocabulary, how the game will communicate with them. Players often worry about taking fall damage, but they also worry about taking a step that they can't take back. So here, a welcoming crate to land on signals that dropping down is safe and it's the way forward. And when the crate breaks, it reinforces the physics simulation, and is likely the first time players will see that larger objects can be broken apart.
Yeah, I think the right decision here is to uninstall the game and then reinstall it. I see no other way to like go around this. In the meantime, like I speculated this, but I actually want to check it out if Counter-Strike Source has been fucked with this update or not. I'm really curious because what happened last time with the 25th anniversary of Half-Life 1, it just completely fucked Counter-Strike 1.6. I'm looking at the discussions and I see nothing. Guess it didn't do that. Counter-Strike Source. Seems like they have learned from the previous mistake. Let me just open up Source for a second. I'm downloading Half-Life 2. I legit thought I have gotten rid of Winter mod, but apparently no. Why does it take an eternity to roll up Tuscan? Because I'm downloading. Mm. The Liga, whatever, client is open. Raising the bar is set to return. Hopefully, simple reinstall will be able to like get rid of the snow. There's already a lot of mods. Go fuck yourself, G-Man intro. Hatsune Miku is Alex. Jesus, there's like 500 workshop items. What are they? Half-Life Alyx Metro Cup. Markiplier. Resident Evil Source. I mean, this makes modding so much easier because I have this as a standalone version. Dude. The workshop is already so fucking cancerous. Jesus Christ. It is so bad. Oh my god. Okay. There's no snow. There's still snow. Fuck you, man. How?
Pick up that can. Contextualizing tutorials, creating a story scenario in which they happen, lets us do more than just stop the game to teach players something. We get to add narrative value to the moment. Here, teaching the player how to throw objects is combined with a narrative setup that gives them a choice in how to respond. After watching the Metro cops casually abuse citizens, it felt right to put the player in a similar position next. If they had opinions on how the citizens should have reacted, now they get to express them. Playtesting showed most players either complied or refused the request to pick up the can, but some tried to avoid the confrontation entirely. Others would comply initially, then retaliate after feeling humiliated. By keeping the moment relatively constrained, in both terms of player actions and the space itself, we could generally react appropriately to whatever choice they made.
What is this, man?
Playtesting. Playtesting is a core part of how we make games. We can never fully predict how players will respond or what they'll take away from what we've built. So we test to learn and hopefully improve. During a playtest, we don't guide or talk to the player, even if they're stuck, as it's extremely unlikely that we'll be sitting there next to the player once the game ships. Our goal is for testers to forget that they're playtesting altogether and play as if they're at home. Any interruptions risk skewing the data, so we only step in if there's a bug that's blocking progress, or more rarely, if their behavior is so confusing that we need to understand what they're thinking.
What is wrong with this Metro Cup, man? What is wrong with you, man?
And started at the shadows that left behind caverns all. But inseparable from instinct.
Early in a Half-Life game, one of our goals is to make promises to the player, giving them a sense of what to expect later on. From movies to TV shows and books, all great entertainment does this in some way, and video games are no different. The promises in a Half-Life game can take different forms. Some are simple, like offering just a glimpse of something intriguing.
How do I get rid of the snow? Seriously, how do I do that?
Interactions with
It's not
Metropods.
snowing yet, it's
By
retarded.
putting the player in a powerless position against them, we set the stage for that future moment when they can finally get to retaliate.
I think I'm just gonna verify the integrity, see if that helps. Workshop, installed files, verify the integrity. That kind of restores files, I think. When I hit uninstall, I think it didn't bother uninstalling the files that were replaced. Or just generally doesn't uninstall texture files. Yeah. It's gonna take a while if there's like 14 commentary thingy on these maps. Just please get rid of the snow. Just please do that. In the meantime, let's look at workshop items. Most subscribed. Coif Live 2007. I think I'm gonna play a lot of Half-Life 2. It was worth it just because of the workshop. I don't know why they didn't do that for Half-Life 1. Would have been so fun. Female headcrab zombie. Water, right, Dr. Kleiner. Mr. Beast zombie, okay, I see. Please, no more snow, please. Can you do that for me? No more fucking snow, please. I fucking give up! How the fuck is snow still here? Dude! How the fuck does it not get rid of it? Insane. Yeah, uninstalling does nothing, so I just went to the folder and deleted everything. Okay, but I have to wait, I don't know, another 20 minutes for this to download, because I don't know. For some reason it takes an eternity to download a 5 GB game, 6 GB, sorry. Meantime, let's look at workshop items. Already anime mods. Okay. Adolf Hitler or breed. It's gonna be downloaded anytime soon. Honestly, very interesting. Halfway to penis. GM construct. There's a lot of total conversions mods already available here that I have never heard of. Like Stanley Parable is here too. Isn't that illegal? It's a standalone game. Or the original edition, okay. Who cares about illegality? Fuck developers. Store and their game. Gargantua replaces Alex. Birdies, animes, all sorts of shit is already here. I'm interested in this Coif Life thing. Whatever this is. Bioshock Infinite Elizabeth replaces Alex. Okay, if there's still snow, I'm giving up because I literally fucking vibed off the game and did a fresh install on my computer. There's no other way for snow textures to exist within the game. If then, that's just the part of the 20th anniversary, whatever. It just vibed off my... okay. Hide my settings.
The Citadel. We wanted the player's first view of City 17 to highlight the
Finally, no snow. By the way,
representing the
playable game now.
And total power over humanity. It also needed to serve as a clear goal. Even at the start, you can see where your journey ends. But despite its massive size, playtesters often miss it. A player's sense of depth and scale can be tricky on a computer monitor. If you've played any games in VR, you'll likely have noticed that scale feels more natural. Anyway, in this case, the Citadel's position above the player didn't help things either, which may be because FPS games train players to focus straight ahead or down at their feet. To improve the chances of players taking in the Citadel, we added birds flying towards the structure. A subtle trick we found helps guide the player's view.
Ropes. One of the things we noticed in all of the reference images that we gathered for City 17 was that there were cables and wires everywhere. and that they were a large part of the high-frequency detail in view. We loved the look of these older, European cities enmeshed in the haphazard web of modern life. We felt like we needed a solution for cables, ropes, and similar elements, and we wanted them to be dynamic. Our level designers were eager to create plug puzzles, and connecting a cord to
They shouldn't be this close to each other, I feel like.
Early in production, we built
there's gonna be a lot of them.
iterated on it throughout development. Under the hood,
Interested in listening to them, but I also want to get on with the game.
Between the two endpoints, and they can move independently. Each segment acts like a spring and responds to forces in the game, such as a gentle wind or the passing of a combine gunship overhead. When rendered, each segment is shown facing the camera and is bump mapped, which is crucial for giving the ropes a realistic, rounded appearance.
Exploration. After being herded through the train station by Metro cops, we wanted to give the player a chance to explore. This plaza offered several ways to interact with citizens, Metro cops, scanners, and the city infrastructure. We aimed for these interactions to continue building the world without needing explicit tutorials, and we refined them until they work naturally, without any real training.
Playtesting Anecdote 1. One memorable playtest reminded us that we can never be certain what players are thinking or what lessons they've taken from their experience. This tester, after playing from the start and stuck trying to open a door, spent several minutes going back and forth between the game and the keyboard settings. When we asked what they were looking for, they said they were searching for the inventory controls, thinking they could use an item they'd picked up earlier to unlock the door. While we'd seen them collect and drop several physics objects, they'd misunderstood what was happening. The tester believed that pressing the use key while holding an object moved it into an inventory because the item dropped straight down. We knew it was just gravity, but their assumption wasn't crazy. Some adventure games of that era did slide items into an invisible inventory that way. We explained there was no inventory, and the playtest continued. Later, we considered whether we needed to address this, but since no other playtesters had the same confusion, and all of our potential solutions were more heavy-handed than necessary, we decided it was an outlier.
And it's so dumb that playtesters influence so much. If like other people
of how even the most subtle, overlooked details can mislead a player.
If like other people also got confused why there's no inventory in this game, then they would have put it into the game, even though they don't necessarily needed it ever in this game. So fucking weird.
This simple moment is a promise that you'll encounter this enormous thing later in the game. Even an uncomplicated scene such as this really does require a lot of playtesting and iteration because of Half-Life's goal of not taking control away from the player. As you can imagine, it takes a lot of small tweaks to ensure that as many players as possible are looking at the right place at the right time here. The street layout and the Metrocop scene are all set to guide the player's gaze, perfectly framing the Strider when it appears.
Early game exploration. Up until this plaza, the player likely hasn't had to think much about their path, as it's been clear and straightforward. But here, we wanted to encourage exploration, which meant making the way forward less obvious, which can produce a feeling of being lost or, worse, confused, as you might expect. These kinds of shifts can be tough, especially early in the game, when the player is still learning the game's guidance cues. Here, it's further complicated by force-fielded checkpoints, which allow NPC citizens to move through, but restrict the player, leading many playtesters to believe that there was a way to bypass them. Ultimately, it was extensive testing that helped us find the right visibility for the alley forward, using lighting, layout, and a wooden crate, an object players have already used as a sign they're headed in the right direction, all to subtly guide them forward.
What the fuck? I was sent flying, man.
Closed captions. During Half-Life 2 development, we were approached by folks interested in accessibility to encourage us to go beyond the subtitle system we had built for Half-Life 1. They requested a full-featured closed captioning system to capture all game sounds, not just dialogue. This turned out to be a much tougher challenge than expected. Half-Life 2 produced a wide variety of sounds, and categorizing them for captioning was simple. Prioritization was also key. Dialogue needed to stand out, and it had to be clear who was speaking. Ambient sounds, like distant combat, were important for setting the mood in some levels, but less so if there was an enemy shooting nearby. Our level designers also often reuse sounds in different contexts, so sound might require captioning in one area, but not in another. Ultimately,
Every sound in the game ended up with its own caption data, formatted almost like a small version of HTML, giving us control over the visual style of each caption. As with the audio files, the caption data was too large to keep in memory, so we built an asynchronous caching system to handle it efficiently.
Physics simulation. Even though we began Half-Life 2 with a functional third-party physics simulation, it still took us years of additional work both on the simulation itself and its integration into the game until we felt like we could meet our designers' ambitions. Maintaining a shippable level of quality and performance was something we knew would be a challenge along the way, but the more subtle issue was actually figuring out what to simulate and to what extent. We can't simulate everything, and even if we could, there are game design reasons why the experience is better when we don't. In many cases, we deliberately bend the simulation to improve the player's experience. These adjustments usually go unnoticed because they align with player intentions. For example, we disable collisions between the player and large objects to let them turn in narrow spaces. Or we tweak the Combine rifle's alternate fire to gently guide the Combine ball toward enemies, making it more effective.
Crate Baby. This small baby doll has a long legacy. During the long months of internal testing, some of the team turned it into a challenge, a way to make the 47th playthrough of the game a bit more fun. They'd place the doll inside of a nearby blue crate and see how far they could carry it throughout the game. After Half-Life 2 launched, the community started carrying Crate Baby as well, adding their own stories and rules to the mix. A few years later, while working on Episode 2, this was the inspiration for the Little Rocket Man achievement, where players had to carry a garden gnome dubbed Gnome Chomsky throughout the entire episode. Chomsky even made a comeback for Left 4 Dead 2 in the Garden Gnome achievement, where players had to carry him through the Dark Carnival campaign. These kind of interactions with players are some of the most rewarding parts of game development. You design games with theories in mind, but you never really know where things are going until players get their hands on it.
Physics Simulation 2. Areas where game design or other constraints impacted the physical simulation often required extra tuning to keep the simulation from blowing up. As an example, early on we experimented with increasing the simulation on the player entity, which is to say, make player movement much more a part of the physical simulation of the world. We knew this might make movement feel less precise, but hoped it could lead to some novel experiences. However, after tuning the movement to match the less simulated version, we hit a major problem. The physical force needed for the player to move at their usual speed was so high that simply running into other simulated objects could result in death from the impact. We iterated on it, but ultimately couldn't find a solution we liked and reverted to the less simulated movement. However, this wasn't exactly the easier path. It introduced new challenges with how the less simulated player interacted with the more simulated objects in the game. But it did allow us to deliver the precise movement experience we wanted.
Playground. When we discussed ways to highlight our physics simulation around the city environment, the playground felt like the natural fit. The players paying attention to Dr. Green,
physics simulation.
Humanity surrendered to the combat. We chose a few playground structures with interesting physics potential and began tuning them.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Even with the advanced physics simulation we had at the time, setups like this always
fucking
required
broken.
as we had fully simulated objects interacting with non- or partially simulated ones, such as the player or static world geometry. It might be easy to assume that a simulation can carry a lot of the load of implementation, but even now, 20 years later, that is rarely the case. Back when we were working on the playground, late in development on the game, we couldn't get the friction on the slide to feel right, so we decided to break the ladder so the player couldn't get up there. However, you still can just walk right up the front. As is commonly the case, you, the player, get the last laugh on us.
Okay. If there's 14 each loading screen, then I'm never gonna finish the game.
Materials and shaders.
Okay,
Half-Life 2
7.
came out in the
Fine.
midst of a significant shift in 3D graphics.
This is still
where
a
the
thing,
industry
right?
moved from textures to materials and shaders. In Half-Life 1, every
It's still a thing.
onto the polygon of the surface.
Of course, why would they change that?
5 years later,
They don't update the engine itself.
material and a shader. The shader was a lump of code that customized how the surface was rendered. The material defined properties for how the surface behaved physically and how it responded to gameplay
Crazy.
features. It also held references to textures and other parameters for the shader to use for rendering. As a result, artists and designers had much more control over how things looked and behaved.
Cube maps. With the addition of materials and shaders, we needed a solution for reflective surfaces like glass and steel. These surfaces had to know what to reflect, but in 2003 we couldn't do any of that rendering in real time. So we developed the cube map system for pre-computed reflections. A cube map is a set of 6 images on the inside of a cube, capturing the environment in every direction, like a panoramic photo that surrounds you on all sides. Level designers placed invisible marker entities throughout the levels, and during map compilation, we generate a cube map at each marker. Then, during gameplay, when rendering a reflective surface, we locate the nearest...
Why was I teleported here? This is gonna be
The raid.
6th one, okay.
The section ahead, where the Metro Cops raid the apartment while the player is inside, took a lot of iteration to get right. Generally, we design Half-Life to let players set their own pace, since people move through the game in a variety of ways. Some players run, ignoring anything that doesn't seem like a threat, while others methodically poke at everything. So, whenever we need to force a specific pace, it's always a challenge to ensure players perceive that pace and naturally play along. Since this is the first time we do this, we had to put in a lot of work to make it clear to the player that they needed to move quickly, and there's no time for exploration here.
The Raid 2. In addition to making sure the player felt the pressure to move forward, we had to ensure the raid itself was foolproof. There couldn't be any way for the player to avoid it or double back past the Metro Cop. The real challenge wasn't that players would try to break the scene, but that many would panic and run in random directions once they realized they were under threat for the first time. This moment requires a delicate balance. We wanted a heart-pounding escape, the sense of real danger, but we wanted players to make it through on their first try and feel like they escaped by the skin of their teeth. To achieve this, we kept the path ahead clear and reminiscent to the one they had just taken through the previous floor. A series of carefully placed triggers controls the threats appearing ahead and behind, maintaining the pressure while still giving players enough time to stay ahead of their pursuers.
Loading screens are faster than they were previously.
Health and no HUD. The rooftop chase sequence posed a unique design challenge. We didn't want it to be a true gameplay obstacle, and our best case was for players to make it through on their first try. But we still wanted to create the sense of real danger, where players felt legitimately threatened if they didn't keep moving. The challenge was that without the HEV suit, players don't technically have a heads-up display or HUD, which means no way to show damage or remaining health. After some experimenting, we created a special health system for this section, using a red glow around the screen to indicate damage. Players reacted as we hoped, taking it as a sign to keep moving, and the chase unfolded as intended. To top it off, we made health regenerate quickly so the glow wouldn't linger, reinforcing the players that running was indeed the right choice, and ensuring players weren't taken down by a stray bullet at the end just because they dawdled or hesitated earlier on.
Playtesting Anecdote 2. In the upcoming section, we needed the player to be knocked down so Alex could save them. With limited time and resources, we simplified the encounter as much as possible, reusing existing systems and letting it play out like a normal combat sequence, with a custom event triggered when the player died. After a few playtests to fine-tune the timing, we moved on. But as we got close to shipping, we encountered a problem with a playtester who quick-saved constantly and immediately hit quick load whenever they thought they'd failed. When a Metro Cop hit them, they quick loaded before Alex could step in, repeating this more than 10 times before we asked them to stop. At this stage of development, in the final bug fixing phase, we had to learn ourselves.
Why would they say that to him?
Issues.
I wouldn't backseat a playtester.
Something more important. Knowing this was a rare edge case, because most players had no trouble, we made a few conservative changes. We shortened the delay between the knockdown and Alex's first line, and changed the fade-out color to white instead of black, which wasn't ultimately that useful since players hadn't died enough yet to associate black with death. We considered disabling quick load for the few seconds that the scene plays out, but we were worried that could introduce a bug where quick load became disabled permanently.
Oh no.
No, you don't.
Dr. Freeman, I presume. We better hurry. The Combine can be slow to wake, but once they're up, you don't want to get in their way.
Alex. Nailing Alex's design was a big challenge. We wanted the player to both respect and care for her. Saving Eli was a key player goal midway through the game, and we knew that getting players to care about that goal would be easier if they also cared about Alex and her relationship with her father. We intentionally designed, wrote dialogue, and cast a voice actor for Alex to be savvy, capable, and relatable within the Combine-controlled world, while also making her attractive and charismatic. We aimed to avoid the objectification, exaggeration, and hypersexuality that many games of the 2000s featured, as we felt that would undermine our goals for her character.
Unlucky.
This way, Gordon. This way, Gordon. I'm Alex Vance. My father worked with you back in Black Mesa. I'm sure you don't remember me, though. Man, a few words, aren't you?
NPCs on elevators. NPCs on elevators. We often spend a significant amount of time solving problems that players might not even notice. Many of these are subtle design challenges, while others stem from multiple systems interacting with each other. For example, getting non-player characters to ride in elevators posed a complex problem because it involved various systems, NPC AI decision-making, navigation planning, and movement simulation, to name a few. Additionally, the elevator itself had its own simulation requirements unrelated to NPCs. One of the more subtle challenges came from the fact that we simulate NPCs at a slower rate than we simulate elevators. This meant that NPCs on a descending elevator would simulate to make sure they were properly standing on the elevator, and then the elevator would simulate a few times, each time moving further down the elevator shaft, subtly leaving the NPC behind. Shortly after that, the NPC would simulate a second time and pop itself down on the elevator floor once again. You can imagine that it was hard to take Alex seriously when she was constantly falling down in small increments while talking to you.
Would have been better.
Interactive storytelling. When we started on Half-Life 2, storytelling in games was generally either high fidelity and linear or low fidelity and interactive. We knew players had seen high-quality storytelling in games, but they'd never been placed right in the middle of it, able to watch it unfold around them, interact with it, and examine any part closely. While that goal excited us, we didn't yet know how it would work or what kind of technology we'd need to make it happen. We had built a variety of storytelling technology in Half-Life 1, but it was mostly presented in front of the player and lacked the interactivity and fidelity we were aiming for. So Kleiner's lab became the section of the game we used as a testbed to figure out how our interactive storytelling would actually function. Interactive.
Funny, you showing up on this day in particular. We've been helping people escape the city on foot.
Kleiner's lab. Kleiner's lab was the first piece of storytelling we worked on, and the one that took the longest to figure out. In addition to its role in launching the player into the game, it eventually became the unifying vision of the development team. storytelling. As we began building our characters and narrative delivery around the player, many questions arose, all of which felt like major risks for the game. Would players be able to extract the important information from the scene? Could we get them to care about these characters? How would we support players with varying levels of investment in the story? How costly would it be to produce a scene like this? And how many more would we need? These and many more were questions we couldn't answer until we'd built enough of the scene and tested it with a lot of playtesters. Frustratingly, unlike many other problems we faced, these weren't questions we could confidently answer until we had done significant work. We can often test gameplay ideas with low-fidelity prototypes, but if a player isn't invested in our storytelling when the characters are just gray blocks, how confident can we be that they'll care once the characters are fully realized?
Choreography. The system we built and iterated on to deliver Half-Life 2's storytelling was internally called Choreo, short for choreography. Early on, we found it useful to imagine we were writing a play where one of the actors didn't know the script. We needed a system that could control all the other actors, moving them around the stage, delivering their performances and speaking their lines. To handle this, the other actors would need to seamlessly mix our directorial commands with dynamic responses to the player's position and behavior. Timing was clearly going to be a major challenge, as any part of the scene might need to lengthen, contract, or even pause, depending on what the player was doing.
FacePoser. The primary tool we built to power the choreo system was called FacePoser, an inaccurately named program that allowed our animators to lay out the entire structure of our scenes along a timeline. The timeline contained a series of choreo commands for the actors, along with all the necessary information for them to perform those commands. By layering these commands on the timeline, animators could easily describe how an actor might need to face one thing while talking towards another and walk to a different location, all at the same time. But the timeline wasn't a fixed linear sequence. Actors would follow their commands, but they had to respond dynamically to the world around them. An actor might take longer to move to a location if the player is in the way, or they might need to wait to deliver a line because another actor has been delayed by the player. FacePoser allowed us to rapidly iterate on scenes, trying different layouts, dialogue deliveries, and timings. This ability to quickly experiment and adjust proved critical in finding the right performances to achieve our character and narrative goals. Choreo commands. This debug visualization shows the two most common choreo commands actors receive throughout a scene, internally known as look-ats and move-tos. Actors are given targets to look at, sometimes more than one at a time, and then try to focus on the one that makes the most sense given their current state. At the same time, they might be receiving move-to commands, which tell them to move to a location and face a specific direction or object. Even these commands
and it's blocked by a barrel.
A scene might require an actor to talk while typing on a keyboard, all while looking at an object the player is holding. Since we couldn't predict where the player would be during playback, authoring scenes like this required us to break each element of the scene into separate pieces and layers. These could then be reassembled as needed during playback, based on the player's actions and interrupted if necessary.
Taking the streets, you might as well get him out of his civvies. What? Oh dear, you're right. I almost forgot.
Delivery. It took a lot of iteration and playtesting to strike the right balance of information and emotional connection in our major choreo scenes. Each scene had a lot of information we needed to convey to the player, but we couldn't just have characters spouting exposition. Players would start thinking of them more as signposts than as people. We needed to take the time to let the characters interact with each other, allowing the player to observe the relationships. At the same time, we had to expand upon the world, giving the player a sense of everything that had happened while they were gone. All this had to be done carefully, without taking too long. We wanted the game to work for players who were less invested in the narrative. Animation became a powerful tool in communicating the emotional connections between characters, often conveying the depth of a moment quickly without overstating it. Humor was another commonly used tool, helping to puncture a setup and disarm the player when things got a bit too heavy.
Lab interactivity. In our choreo scenes, we have the player trapped for a bit, allowing us to focus on the characters and narrative. To accommodate different players, some deeply invested in the story, others unable to stand still for more than a second.
Yeah, that's me.
We needed a constant stream of interesting details on screen. We scattered narrative elements throughout the environment, ensuring some were interactive, essentially toys for the player to tinker with. In some cases, we embedded further storytelling into these, like the cactus mini teleporter hinting at the upcoming teleporter failure. It was a delicate balance. Too much visual interest could distract players from the core of the scene. Ultimately, Kleiner's lab played it safe with interactivity, as it was the first major choreo scene. Later, in Eli's lab, we
What are they saying? Choreo theme?
ensuring the characters themselves
I don't understand that, bro.
players were tinkering with.
Writing. In the Half-Life 1 era, player goals in FPS games were still largely about fighting and defeating an obviously evil enemy. It was hard to get players to care about characters when they were as low fidelity as they were in Half-Life 1. With the planned improvements in character fidelity in Half-Life 2,
That is such a developer thing to say. Like, just because the graphics suck, I don't care about the character. What the fuck? Hello, Silent Hill? Well,
their hopes and fears, and to want them to succeed. With this in mind, we were able to assemble our approach to character and dialogue.
I'm gonna be honest, I care more about Half-Life 1 Barney than all the other characters here. Literally never cared about the rebellion in Half-Life 2. Because I'm a psycho.
Just someone who's been away from them. The characters demonstrated realistic emotional connections with each other. We believed we could build an emotional connection with the player as well.
Archetypes. We wanted to create narrative links between Half-Life 1 and Half-Life 2 through our characters. Our idea was to design individuals who felt like representations of Half-Life 1's archetypes, so that players might find them familiar, almost as though they'd met them in Half-Life 1 at some point, but they couldn't quite remember. We based Dr. Kleiner on the scientist model we felt was the most iconic, and his personality was largely shaped by Hal Robbins, whose voice and performances had defined the Half-Life 1 scientists. One day, when we were in the thick of trying to figure out this character, Dr. Kleiner's face came into focus as we happened to share an elevator with an accountant from an office on another floor of our building. And looking at him, it was clear that this is Dr. Kleiner's face. Luckily, he was receptive when we asked if we could photograph him for a video game character.
This way, Gordon.
Tone. Setting the right tone for our characters and their dialogue was critical. We aimed for a respectful, almost pleasant style of interaction with the player, while avoiding anything that felt too subservient. This balance was especially tricky with Alex, who needed to support the player without compromising the strength of her character, something we felt was crucial for players to respect. Her relationship with Eli was a core driver of the player's motivations, so it was important that players liked her and wanted to help her. We also wanted to contrast the warmth and camaraderie between the player's allies against the hostilities of Green and the Combine, inspiring a sense of righteous indignation in the players for the battle.
Oh no, this idiot. Fucking neighbors.
Character reaction. Figuring out what characters...
It's like hammering something, I don't know.
Challenge. At the core,
Dumbass.
we always want the game to respond to player input. However, any response from the game can be seen as a reward by the player. So, what characters react to and what they ignore teaches the player about the kind of input the game expects. As a result, we make sure to respond to things we wanted more of, like players tinkering with devices in the lab, and ignored behaviors we wanted less of, like players repeatedly slapping Kleiner in the face with a box over and over again. Seriously, we watched a playtester do it for 5 minutes straight.
Animation. Constructing believable human motion for our characters out of many discrete layers of animation required a lot of technological iteration. Even simple actions like turning to look at something or walking to a location became more complex when combined with the need to dynamically respond to the player and the requirements of choreo commands. For example,
Choreo commands again, this
word.
word.
To be fully composed, allowing a character to use any combination of its eyes, head, shoulders, upper torso, or full body to face a target. In Half-Life 1, human characters have their bodies separated into upper and lower halves, allowing them to walk in one direction while facing another. However, this approach was too abstract for Half-Life 2's characters. Instead, our animators created walking animations in all 8 directions of the compass, which could then be smoothly blended together at runtime.
Voice actors. To create more responsive and multidimensional characters in Half-Life 2, we needed to evolve our approach to working with voice actors. While running through a script with a modicum of direction was sufficient for much of the NPC dialogue for Half-Life 1, for Half-Life 2, we decided to give the actors more of an opportunity to be involved in helping to define the characters and bring them to life. We provided much more story context to the actors, showing them the game world, the environments their characters inhabited, and the other characters they interacted with. We sought actors who could take all that information and synthesize it into their performances to elevate their characters beyond what we had imagined. We held multiple sessions with the main actors, allowing them to digest and build upon their characters over time. For scenes where characters are interacting with each other, we'd often cue an actor with performances from other actors in the scene to create a better sense of connection and flow. Though we'd arrive at the studio with a script and a plan for the recording session, we made sure that the actors felt empowered and had the space to bring their own ideas to the character and performances. Having animators attend the voiceover sessions also proved critical, as they were responsible for stitching the characters' dialogue together with physical actions and expressions to form the resulting choreo scene. Often, animators found that their plans for how a scene would play out evolved quite a bit after working with the voice actor.
That's what you said last time.
Alex's kiss. It's a small moment, but Alex's kiss on Eli's cheek was important. Eventually, we're going to ask the player to save Eli, and we want them to care about him. To build that emotional connection, we needed to show the warmth and affection between Alex and Eli. We didn't want to oversell it with dialogue or make it too big of an event. It had to feel genuine, not performative. And we were able to iterate on the subtleties of this moment until it struck just the right note.
That's it.
Scene interactivity. At certain points in our choreo scenes, we require the player to take action. Beyond simply giving them something to do and keeping them engaged, these moments served a few key purposes. First, they allowed the player to catch up, even if they've been distracted by something else in the environment. The scene could safely pause until the player completed the task, ensuring they were back and paying attention. At the same time, it let us position the player where we needed them, which was useful for framing the scene and making sure they saw something important. In some cases, we got double value out of these moments by using them to train the player. Here, they're learning to interact with plugs and sockets, a skill they'll need for puzzles later in the game.
Monitors. We use monitors a lot for storytelling in Half-Life 2 in the episodes, so much so that we even make fun of ourselves for it. The problem is they're just too damn useful. They're fantastic for expanding the world by showing events happening elsewhere, and they provide an easy way to have characters talk without needing to explain how they all got to the player's location. Anyone who's ever written any kind of story, especially one with an ensemble cast, understands the unique frustration of trying to create natural reasons for all of your characters to come together in the same place. In this case, we were really happy with how the monitor allowed Alex to teleport away and then quickly appear in Eli's lab, making everything feel real and connected.
All right, Barney, your turn. Gee, thanks. Gordon, as soon as you're in position, we'll send you to Eli's. You're not a moment too soon. Initialize in 3, 2, 1. Barney, if you'll be so kind. Good luck out there, Gordon. Yes, indeed. We're ready to project you, Gordon. Bon voyage, and best of luck in your future endeavors. Final sequence. What the hell? What is it? It's your head, the freaking headhopper! Car, steady! Look out! There he is! Is Lamar with him? Get about that thing!
He's coming through, Dad. What's going on here? I'm not sure. It seems to be some kind of interference.
Gordon, stay put. We'll get you out of here.
Something is drawing him away.
What's the meaning of this? Who are you? How did you get in here?
Hey, take these back. I'm getting him out of there. Can you please reveal? Don't worry, Gordon.
There he is! Oh, we're losing him again.
The man I saw, I'm all but certain it was Gordon Freeman.
He didn't come through. Then where is he?
Behind you. Shut it down, shut it down.
You must get out of here. Run! Get down out of sight. I'll come find you.
Okay, hopefully there's gonna be less developer commentary. 7. Fuck me.
Another critical tool we built into FacePoser.
It's too much. It's just too much for a normal playthrough.
Dialogue lines and extract phonemes to generate basic lip sync animations for our characters. For the hero characters, our animators use this as a starting point to create high-quality custom animations for each dialogue line.
Like, look how close they are to each other.
However, in a dynamic choreo scene, the animators wouldn't know exactly what the rest of the actor's body would be doing. This meant it required careful layering of choreo commands and timing of face poses, while still maintaining the actor's ability to dynamically respond to the player.
At the time of Half-Life 2's release, most first-person shooters gave the player a gun or a melee weapon right off the bat, but we opted to start them empty-handed. Without a weapon, it was easier to train the player on the more novel ways they're able to interact with the world, and introduce them to our story. We wanted the player to transition from fugitive to the aggressor, and arming them at the right time created that moment naturally. By the time they finally get a weapon, they're done running away. They say sometimes the best way to win is to walk away, but we all know that's not true. The best way to win is to run towards something while shooting at it.
Dynamic mixing. During gameplay, many sounds are playing at the same time, but some are naturally more important than others, and we need to set the volumes of the sounds relative to each other to ensure that the important ones stand out. In a movie, this sound mixing is done as a post-process, but in a game, it happens real-time, responding to the player's actions, so we can't predict ahead of time which sounds will play simultaneously. To handle this, all the sounds are grouped into types and tagged with priorities. And during gameplay, the audio system monitors all the active sounds and lowers the volume of sounds in a group if a higher priority sound is playing. And this mixing is adjustable. If the gunshots need to be loud in one scene, we can make them higher priority there. If a specific line of dialogue needs to be heard clearly, it can then force all the other sounds to drop in volume. And we do the same thing with music. It's a subtle but very critical system, and it just prevents the soundscape from becoming too cluttered.
How the fuck does one get back there? There we go.
Bullet audio. If there's one thing we're sure of,
This game is very loud, by the way. 15 is enough.
Bullets will fly past a player throughout the game, so we spent a bunch of time trying to perfect the audio treatment for it. Unfortunately, bullets in the game are essentially instantaneous, so we can't just attach a sound to them and rely on the movement for positioning. So after some experimentation, we landed on this solution. By figuring out the closest point on the bullet's trajectory to the player's ear, we calculate the exact time and position the bullet would conceptually pass them. We then play two different sounds at that point to fake a Doppler effect, one for the bullet's approach and one for its departure. And we delay the departure sound based on the calculated time the bullet passed by.
Audio capture. Another problem we ran into was the sheer amount of audio in the game. With all the gameplay sounds, music, and dialogue, we had too much audio to be able to store it all in memory. Memory was a premium in 2003. But as you can imagine, we need to be able to play sounds immediately, especially if they're gameplay related. So we built an audio cache, which stored only the first 125 milliseconds of every audio file and kept that in memory. That 125 millisecond time was our best guess for how long it would take us to be able to stream an audio file in from disk. Then, whenever a sound was played in
I think I'm gonna give up on these. Like you know where I will be right now? At Nova Prospect.
By the time
Legit.
our cache start ended, we'd have the file loaded and could continue playing the rest of the sound. There were some other minor features, like keeping recent sounds fully in memory so that high traffic ones didn't need to be loaded constantly. In today's engines, all kinds of assets, beyond just sounds, typically use the same kind of strategy.
Physics sound. Getting physics to feel right for the player meant that the sounds produced by physics had to sound right too. As humans, we're all used to how objects and materials sound during various interactions, even if it's not something we actively notice. While we knew we couldn't account for everything, we wanted to focus on the details that contributed most to making our physics sound realistic. We started with per-object sounds for collisions and impacts. This allowed an object like a wooden crate to have custom sounds when it collided with other objects or classes of objects. Next, we began dynamically modifying these sounds based on the characteristics of the physical event, such as the masses involved and the force of the collision. This worked great for collisions, but didn't hold up in other interactions like objects scraping against each other. In reality, a wooden crate makes a different sound when it scrapes against the wall versus when it's thrown against that same wall. Let me tell you, nobody has done more research on the nuances of a wooden crate's physical properties than us. To get what we wanted out of these interactions, we implemented per-material collision sounds, metal against wood, metal against metal, and so on. These sounds were also dynamically modified based on details, like material hardness or type of metal. Getting this system to sound right required countless small tweaks, which we could only identify once it was running. We also experimented with custom sounds for rolling objects, but ultimately cut the feature because we weren't happy with the results.
Okay, this is a waste of time to listen to all of these.
All the sounds the player hears are...
Yeah, I'm only gonna listen to the ones that I pick up on the way, and if it gets into a loading screen, then I just don't care about it, I guess.
The Metrocops are the bad guys, except this time the player has a weapon and can finally do something about it. That something comes out of the barrel of a gun. We knew we needed the player to feel righteous, and this moment was part of creating that. The Metrocops are still human, unlike the rest of the Combine in the game, so we felt like we had to go the extra mile in making sure the player's actions felt like justice and not just wrath.
No, it was wrath.
There are situations throughout the game that stem from simple and quite straightforward design.
What the fuck? It locks me in this view.
The first was to frame the Citadel as it awakened, showing the player they stirred up the hive. The second was to showcase our ragdoll system. While it's standard now, in 2004 it was still a novelty to see bodies tumble realistically, and stairs provided a perfect stage to make that happen.
City 17 Awakens. The early train station section was designed to make the city feel indifferent toward the player, as if Gordon is just another nameless, faceless citizen, ripe for subjugation. But during the tenement raid and rooftop chase, the city identifies the player as an anomaly and starts to stir. Now, with the player as the aggressor, the city fully turns its attention on them. The Overwatch PA system, first heard during the raid, played a key role in delivering this message. Closely, there's a lot of City 17 Awakens. The early train station section was designed to make the city feel indifferent toward the player, as if Gordon is just another nameless, faceless citizen, ripe for subjugation. But during the tenement raid and rooftop chase, the city identifies the player as an anomaly and starts...
Lambda caches. Technically, the first Lambda cache is at Finals Lab, but this is the first one the player finds on their own. We added Lambda caches to encourage exploration and to hint at players where hidden resources could be found, with a fiction being that they were being placed by the Resistance as part of their underground rebellion. In Half-Life, the contents of supply crates were predetermined by the level designer. In Film 2, we introduced adaptive item crates that give the player whatever they are low on at the time, based on resource targets set by the level designer.
Shattered glass. When designing early levels where there are fewer mechanics in the player's toolkit, we found that it's just as engaging to spotlight new technical features instead, as we did here with breakable glass. For the shattering effect, glass was divided into a grid of small squares, allowing us to track which were intact or broken, and to blow at larger sections once enough squares were no longer connected. Each Each square was rendered with a unique texture based on the status of its neighboring squares,
Was
creating
this
the
here?
sharp, jagged edges between broken and intact
Yes.
glass. While breaking glass is now commonplace in games, it was something we hadn't seen much back when we were making Half-Life 2, and we're incredibly happy with the level of fidelity and dynamicism it brought to the game.
Water shader. The most complex shader we made for the game was the water shader, which made full use of the newly available programmable graphics cards. When water was present, the scene was rendered 3 times. First, the underwater world for refraction, second, the reflected view, and third, the parts above the water. When rendering the water surface, we blended the refractive and reflective views, showing more reflection at glancing angles using the Fresnel equation. We also tracked the ground depth below the water's surface, making it more transparent and less refractive in shallow areas. Additionally, we had to create 2 alternate water rendering techniques for lower-end graphics cards. Mid-range cards displayed a lower detail reflection without refraction or transparency, while low-end cards only rendered a partially transparent surface.
Boxcar build. This small scene originally featured 2 human characters, but later in development, we replaced one with a Vortigaunt. We wanted to show that Vortigaunts were coexisting with humans and resisting the Combine as well.
Barnacle introduction. Because barnacles can be confusing when first encountered, we wanted to introduce them in a way that showed players their behavior at a safe distance. We decided to do that through a nature show style predator-prey scene. But, as always, scenes like this took a lot of iteration to get players to reliably see.
This is Station 8. We heard 12 go down and out. Surgical strike units are targeting the subway station. Repeat. Protection is coming
cops in this scene jump down into this space via scripted sequences. Later in the game, we use repelling in a similar way. It doesn't matter where they're coming from in reality because players end up telling that story to themselves. We found that in the end, combat should have a story implied in its setup. Ambush, surprise, surge, assault. All of these scenarios use much of the same enemy AI.
Seriously, this idiot.
Physics in puzzles. Often, simpler mechanics encountered earlier in the game are pulled from more complex ones as a form of training. The teeter-totter puzzle, the first physics-based contraption in the game, was actually derived from a later, more intricate...
What is this retard doing, my upper neighbor?
The teeter-totter uses the same principles of mass and ramps, but in a more straightforward way that players can directly interact with, helping them understand the game's physics and making later puzzles easier to tackle. This puzzle also highlights the analog nature of the physics system, with the placement of cement blocks and the player's own weight both factoring into the solution.
Fuck. Wait, past them? Oh, you can jump over here and stomp.
Soundscapes. In Half-Life 1, ambient sounds were placed by hand.
Unlucky. I went through the loading screen.
Get in here, hurry. Civil protection is onto us. We're tearing up the railroad, covering our tracks. Looks like you're gonna be the last one through.
Manhack Matt. We called this guy Manhack Matt. We wanted to give players the sense that hundreds of citizens inhabited the hidden nooks and crannies of City 17. At this point in the game, it had been a while since players had seen a citizen, and we wanted to explain the significance of the Manhacks, which was the first physics-based enemy that we created. In the original concept, there was a video arcade in the city where players could fly Manhacks around to attack virtual citizens. Eventually, players would discover that the Manhacks were real, and so were the citizens. As the Combine occupation became more fleshed out, this idea of a video arcade became a non-fit and eventually fell out of the
Jesus. What the fuck? What the fuck? Why do I fly up in the water? Dude, the movement that's so weird sometimes. Only sometimes. Is this like a blank audio? It didn't say anything. Dude, fuck off. Yeah, what is happening with these audios? It don't play anything.
Rendering systems.
Okay.
In the early 2000s, we couldn't afford a general-purpose renderer with the broad capabilities of a modern engine. Instead, CPU, GPU, and memory limitations required highly specific solutions to rendering challenges so we could squeeze every bit of performance out of a player's
There's a very nice glitch here.
As a result,
I mean, that was
Half-Life 2
rated.
actually has 3 different rendering engines. One for world geometry, another for outdoor
F9,
F9 rendering systems. In the early 2000s, we couldn't afford a general-purpose renderer with the broad capabilities of a modern engine.
Oh,
Instead,
it didn't
CPU,
kill me this time.
GPU, and memory
Still got
limitations
stuck.
required highly specific solutions to rendering challenges so we could squeeze every bit of performance out of a player's hardware. As a result, Half-Life 2 actually has 3 different rendering engines. One for world geometry, another for outdoor terrain, and a third for dynamic entities like characters and objects. These 3 renderers had to support a complicated mix of features: collisions, ray traces, decals, offline lighting, visibility calculations, and more. On top of that, each
GPU Wild West. During development, we faced numerous decisions influenced by our choice of minimum spec, the least powerful CPU and GPU combination that would still deliver a good experience for customers. In the early 2000s, there was far more variety among GPUs than today, with wide differences not only in speed, but in fundamental approaches to rendering. But at the time, we had no real data on the hardware our customers were using. What CPUs and GPUs did they have? How much RAM? Which version of Windows? We reached out to Microsoft hoping
Oh my fucking god. Getting stuck in everything.
cards are in use, or DX8. Unfortunately, they didn't have the data either. Realizing we were at risk of making bad decisions without these
combinatorial shader explosion. Rendering became much more complex during Half-Life 2's development with the addition of hardware shaders, small bits of code controlling how each pixel on the surface should render. In 2003, shaders were far more limited than today. Half-Life 2 era shaders lacked conditionals and had severe code size restrictions. This meant no if-else branching logic to adjust based on different conditions, and no large shaders with broad...
Best part of the game.
Also, compiling shaders as needed was just too slow to be useful, so we had to pre-compile them. To work within these limits, we had to compute every possible shader combination and store each one individually as its own shader. For example, if a shader affected a surface based on a single light source, we'd need another shader version for 2 lights, another for 3, and so on. And it was combinatorial. If that shader also supported
fighting motion sickness. In early playtesting, many players developed motion sickness while driving the airboat. While trying to fix this, we discovered several factors that contributed to it. We found that reducing the intrusion of the airboat into the view helped, so we made several passes on the model to pare it back. Maintaining a consistent frame rate helped as well, so it was important to keep an eye on performance in that sector.
I don't get why they don't carry over to the next chapter. It just stops.
Supply crates that players could smash into the airboat to collect the supplies inside. The mechanics were somewhat gamey, but helped keep the flow of the gameplay going, allowing the player to resupply on the go. To help make the premise
even though I was just given infinite amounts of machine gun ammo, but sure.
So conveniently placed along the player's path. This scene of the citizens dropping
Like,
supply
I
crates
definitely don't need it as of the moment.
also making the canals feel more alive. It also made players feel more heroic and important to be helped by so many supporting characters.
Yeah, I'm being sucked off, technically. Yeah, nothing useful in this. This is like worst enemy in this game. I don't know how he predicts where I'm going every time with this shitty rockets. Dude, it hit me again. Fucking shit. Whatevs, I guess. Why is this switched around? It's so weird. I'm pressing A and it's turning back. Yeah, look at this shit. So weird. If I'm standing still, press A. I don't know, it's just weird. How do I do this usually? Oh, dude, this is so bad. Fucking jump on it, man! Oh my god. I forgot how you do this. It has to be closer, I think. Very close to this. This is really ass. Where is it going? Fucking stay here. Piece of shit. Okay, finally.
Mounted gun. The mounted guns were added here to help train the player on the gun's effectiveness against the attack helicopter for the final battle in the reservoir. This was necessary because up to this point, the helicopter was invulnerable to the player's weapons, and we had to give some indication that it could be harmed with larger weaponry. This was only somewhat effective in playtest due to the amount of pressure the player was under at the moment, which led us to developing the particle effects and sounds that would sell to the players that they were really doing damage.
3D skybox.
Oh,
We've always needed to
fuck
render
you.
a world that feels larger than our map limitations allow. In Half-Life 1, we used a cube map texture to let players see beyond the playable area. But in Half-Life 2, we wanted
fine.
that view into the larger world to be dynamic, not just a static texture. Our map size limitation was about half a mile in each dimension, but we realized we could create a much larger outer world if we stored it at a reduced scale. So, we invented what we called the 3D Skybox. The 3D Skybox is a small box hidden within the actual game map containing geometry at 1/16th scale. Inside it, a reference point corresponds to a matching origin in the main map. Then, when we render the space beyond the playable area, we use the geometry from the 3D Skybox, positioned by that reference point and scaled up 16 times. Getting the lighting and fog to blend seamlessly across the transition from the main map to the Skybox presented some sticky challenges, but it worked. The result made the world feel significantly larger and more immersive than it had in Half-Life 1.
Really now?
357 intro. The Magnum, unlike the basic handgun with its slower rate of fire, is meant to be fired in a more measured, calculated way, dealing catastrophic damage to your target. Earlier versions of the Magnum had a bit of random dispersion, which we felt fit the heft and the less sensitive trigger pull of a larger pistol.
Excuse me, what? Why is this not open?
Carefully line up a shot only to miss due to the accuracy penalty. To address this, we made the first bullet perfectly accurate, with each subsequent shot becoming less accurate as it blasted away.
The fuck? I'm pretty sure I opened it. What the fuck? Now these idiots are out there. Please fuck off. I'm sure I opened it, but perhaps I pressed this fucking shitty button, right? Yeah, I did. I'm sure I did. Oh, it closes after a while. I see. I see. I never knew.
This is another example of us creating movement hazards while driving the airboat. The helicopter attempts to stay in front of the player when dropping bombs, and if the player backtracks, it switches to hovering and turns to attacking him. In one playtest, a bomb just so happened to drop between the pipe seams, creating a pretty cinematic moment. The playtester had a positive reaction, so the team decided to script it so it happened every time. This process has become part of our organic design process. Every so often, a cool thing randomly happens in a playtest, and we find a way to make it happen more reliably.
Uh-huh. That was fair. I like how they reduced the loading screen time. It's way faster now. I guess it utilizes your entirety of the CPU. cocksucker part. This is the most I hate about this. But like the thing is, people hate the entirety of this part, which I cannot fathom. This is an amazing section of the game. So is the core section. I press D, it starts turning left. It's so dumb, it's so dumb, it's just so dumb, it's so dumb.
Displacements 1. After Half-Life 1 shipped, our level designers and artists wanted a better solution for outdoor environments, so we built the first version of our terrain system. It was based on subdivided quads. To visualize this, imagine a flat square divided into a grid, where each point on the grid can be moved up or down. Level designers could lay out multiple squares and then use a paintbrush tool to shape hills and valleys by adjusting the grid points. For rendering, we used a special blended texture, which combined two different textures. Each grid point specified how much of each texture to use, allowing smooth transitions between surfaces like sand, grass, dirt, and gravel. This type of terrain system wasn't unusual in game engines at the time, and we naively thought it would be enough for our game designers.
You're Freeman, aren't you?
I wouldn't believe it if I couldn't see with my own eyes. Dr. Gordon Freeman himself.
Chirping sound effect.
Gotta move out before the Combine picks us up. We're just getting ready to pull out.
Better hurry. Gotta tear down this camp and get out of here.
Gestures. Each of our characters had a library of simple animations called gestures, which we could easily layer on top of other body movements. While originally planned as a production savings to allow us to reuse animations throughout the game, we found they actually had more utility than that. Humans often repeat certain movements, and these can be markers of a specific personality. As a result, our gestures library ended up capturing the essence of each character, helping to unify our animation team's understanding of who those characters were. This made it much easier for our animators to share any one character's workload among themselves, which production often required.
Awesome. Good news is, the Vortigaunt's working his magic on your airboat, so you'll have a little more firepower going forward. I think he's just finishing up now. Go on out. There we are. That gun came off of the same hunter choppers that you're up against. Firefight. Take that chopper down. You'll be able to tear on through to Elon.
Even will accept this weapon or suffer greatly on the road ahead.
I think there's gonna be a loading screen here, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna pick this.
Airboat change-up. We heard from the playtesters that they wanted more varied gameplay from the airboat. Up until this point of the game, the player had no real way to fight back against the helicopter and other enemies, so it felt right to introduce a new weapon, and in turn, deliver a pacing change and set the stage for what would come next. In the subsequent reviews, we added target practice to acquaint people with their new weapon. Extra physics force on the airgun projectiles meant targets would get sent flying and make it feel way more powerful than anything in the player's loadout. Even then,
What the fuck is this? I'm pressing left!
a lot of suspects
Dude!
thought it was invincible and hadn't noticed our
Alright,
efforts
I mean.
it was taking damage.
What the
and
fuck?
out of guns earlier. To get over this, we did the most
This
obvious
game has never done this before. Never ever done this before.
the gun and make it extremely clear that you can and should shoot it. And it will.
What the fuck? Fucking spare enemies. Fucking hate these rocket idiots. Fight me like a man. How do you even fit this many bombs into a helicopter? Shit's just beyond me. That's doable. I don't know where else I can find HP. In the meantime.
Helicopter Megabomb Origin. The Megabomb helicopter attack is based on a bug where a programmer accidentally removed the bomb drop cooldown, resulting in the chopper dropping hundreds of bombs all at once. It looked so cool that we decided that we had to keep it for the final shipping bombing run.
It was an accident. It's funny. Okay, I'm more than happy with this amount of HP and suit. Why did they do this shit when they designed this game? That's what they should be explaining in the developer commentary. Why did they make it so that the airboat tosses you off if you jump on it? So usually there's like a bug here where you're so fast that it doesn't. They didn't fix it. Funny. Definitive Edition, 25th anniversary update. No bug wasn't fixed. Ah well.
Airboat wreckage. Originally, we destroyed the airboat in the jump over the dam. So this level opened with the player and
Alex and Moss. In our early plans for Half-Life 2's narrative, we wanted to take on the challenge of doing something less explicitly game-focused. Not just a story about the good player defeating the obviously evil enemies. Instead, we aimed to focus on characters and their relationships.
I actually root for the Combine. Like, I never was on the side of the rebellion. I wanted the Combine to win.
The tension between Alex and Mossman emerged from that idea.
Why is there a traffic light in here?
Because it felt relatable, something players could understand and empathize.
Also the orange
I do so envy you working
lights
with
up
Eli
as yellow.
and Kleiner when they were at the top of their field. Ah, there we go. You can
It's
come
yellow.
through now.
Or orange, I mean.
I'll take you down to Eli right away. He would never forgive me if I kept you waiting. We could certainly use the extra help around here. We've covered a lot of ground in the last few months, but things would go so much faster if we had more people with your team.
Oh my god, no, no, whatever.
Something the Combine still hasn't mastered. Eli thinks their portals are string-based, similar to our Kaladiao model, but they've failed to factor in the dark energy equations. They can tunnel through from their universe, but once they're here, they're dependent on local transportation. If they knew what we were doing with entanglement... Oh. Listen to me, I sound like a postdoc. I'm just so excited to think that we'll finally have the chance to work together. Where was it? Oh, yes. Dr. Kleiner compressed the Zen relay far beyond anything he imagined at Black Mesa. We figured out how to use Zen as an unexpressed axis, effectively a dimensional slingshot, so we can swing around the border world and come back in local space without having to pass through. Oh, here's Eli now.
All right, good. You keep right up.
Eli, look what I found in
Eli's lab. We built Eli's lab after Dr. Kleiner's, which gave us a better understanding of how to set up and design effective choreo scenes. As a result, we were able to create a more complex scenario with more opportunities for it to respond to the player. Having multiple characters doing their own thing around the room made staging tricky, and it took a lot of iteration and playtesting to get it to run smoothly.
Why is she so dark?
Our experience
Hello?
showed that
Wasn't this
players
fixed?
wanted to play
Hello?
along with the scene. They just needed enough subtle clues to know where we wanted them. Similarly, if they got distracted, the scene had to gently pause and wait for them to return.
I can dig up. Dr. Freeman?
Dude, what the fuck is
It's
that?
been a real honor. I'm looking forward to
We
it.
want to put this dense chunk of visual story here because it's the place the game is most explicit.
There's a light source there.
To explore space. Even though its primary job is world building, we still take strides to highlight the relationship between Eli and Breen, giving context to the world's central conflict.
Oh, you're never getting out of here.
Hugs and pickups. Sometimes even little things can be a nightmare to get working. For example, getting a character to hug another character, or even more simply, just to pick up an object from a table, can cause a lot of issues. Even worse, in our dynamic environment, where the characters and objects aren't in preset positions, and the player is running around getting in the way, these require a level of synchronization that can be quite tricky. They're made harder because humans handle them without thinking. As you're moving to the table to pick up a cup, you're doing all kinds of preparation with your body to get your feet and hands in the right position to allow to do it comfortably. Everything ready right when you get there. If you're moving in to hug somebody, you're both doing it at the same time, adjusting constantly based on each other's movement. To get these features to work in the game involved a lot of synchronization work, making characters aware of each other and the world, and at the same time, getting them to know more about their future plans. It's tempting to want to break up, pick up a cup example into discrete steps. Walk to the table, face cup, pick up a cup, because it's much simpler that way, and it makes the steps nicely reusable. But that's how robots work, not humans. Our characters had to know they were moving to a table with the intention to pick up a cup, so they could work on multiple parts of it simultaneously, making sure their hand grabs the cup right when they get there. With two characters, it's even more of a negotiation. Both need to agree where and when it's going to happen, and everything needs to happen in place in a seamless fashion. While these moments of simple interaction with their characters in the world are often short, they were critical to making them seem like believable people.
Feel free to look around.
No.
Balancing the player's desire to explore with the narrative goals of the scene was always a challenge. We wanted the room to be full of interesting things to look at, but many players wouldn't explore until they were sure they wouldn't miss any of the character performances. That's why it was important for Eli to tell the player to look around midway through the scene. It signaled that it was safe to explore. From there, you could trigger a variety of custom mini-scenes based on what caught the player's interest.
Alex, why don't you take Gordon along and give him some practice with the gravity gun?
Sure. Come on, Gordon. Let's go have some fun.
The zero-point energy field manipulator is not a toy, Alex.
Ugh, let's get out of here.
Why is she so dark?
So I see.
Mossman. Judith Mossman was originally based on a character we had planned for a section of Half-Life 1. That section was cut from the base game and reused in Uplink, but without the character. We consider her the most complex character in Half-Life 2. We knew we'd be walking a tightrope with how the player felt about her even before Nova Prospect, because the player's trusted sources don't agree.
Hey, spoilers!
We recognized there was a limit to how much complexity we could pull off in relationships, but we felt that a stepmother-daughter dynamic was something players would understand. Whether or not you agree with Mossman, she's doing something heroic. She risks being a double agent to get...
Bit of a spoiler here and there.
Character lighting. In the first year of development, we were struggling to get our characters to feel as realistic as we wanted them to. There were actually quite a number of different problems, all of which eventually required specific technological and artistic improvements to fix. The first major problem was lighting. At the time, lighting technology in games had many shortcuts, some due to performance, but many due to misunderstandings of how it all works. To make characters look good at the time, models and textures had to be created with much of their lighting solutions baked into them, like shadows and glossiness. The characters looked cool, but they also looked like video game characters. We started building models with this approach, because that was how you're supposed to do it. We used to bake solutions and lit her like a movie actor, essentially as if she had a custom lighting rig that followed her around and ensured she always looked good. But it didn't really work. The range of lighting environments and the dynamic nature of video games meant that she'd look great in some environments, but always end up looking terribly unrealistic at some point. We tried iterating on our lighting rig, increasing its capabilities, but eventually it felt like we were at a dead end. Returning to the drawing board, we decided to try a different approach. We built her and the lighting and the textures from the ground up, throwing everything away, focusing on not what we wanted her to look like in ideal lighting, but on how things were supposed to work in the real world. It might seem obvious, but it wasn't how it was done, at least not in video games. When looked at outside the game's renderer, these models and textures actually looked worse than the previous versions, but we managed to methodically pull out all the shortcuts and misconceptions about how light and texture and graphics cards work.
Moving the gravity gun. When the gravity gun was first prototyped, we planned to give it to the player midway through the game. But as playtesting progressed, we saw the strength of its design and realized the gravity gun and, more importantly, the ability to launch saw blades at zombie faces needed to come earlier. That meant Eli's lab also needed to move earlier too. It was a significant change, but it was crucial to Half-Life 2's success. It serves as a good reminder that storytelling and gameplay are intertwined.
Fucking gave up.
Priority, they have to work together.
Gordon, this is Dog. My dad built him to protect me when I was a kid. First model was about yay high. I've been adding to him ever since. Haven't I, boy? Okay, Dog, let's play catch with Gordon. You'll need to use the gravity gun. Go ahead, Dog. Throw!
Looking back on Half-Life 2 now, 20 years later, it's sobering to reflect on how terrifying it was throughout much of the development. Game development is hard. You never really get what you'd like to have, which is be able to validate risk before you start to pile more on top of it. For example, our facial animation technology, it took probably 3 or 4 years of work before we were confident it was actually going to work. But we couldn't wait until then. In that first year, we immediately started making all kinds of other choices in our game design, our asset production, and our other technologies, all based on the assumption that our facial animation technology was going to work in the end, from a quality and performance standpoint. If it hadn't, many of those other choices wouldn't have worked either. The same risk profile is true of other large choices we made early on. We can't wait. We just have to build and hope that our guesses will be true years from now. Terrifying.
Why is he so confused? Boom, LeBron. Hello, Dog? Dude, what is he doing? What is he doing? Getting ready of tossing all sorts of shit.
Facial technology. We wanted players to care about our characters, and we even have a chance at achieving that. We knew we had to invest a lot of technology for our characters' faces. It's well understood that humans are wired to pay attention to faces, subconsciously reading all kinds of information from them, so it's an extremely high bar, and if we couldn't reach it, we'd probably push players away from our characters, not towards them as we hoped. We started out doing a lot of research. It was not heartening. The best examples we could find weren't anywhere near close to being able to be run in real time, while the best real-time ones weren't close to the quality we wanted. We wanted to look as good as an animated movie, but they often took hours to render frames and were totally linear, authored by up to 100 animators, whereas ours had to be dynamic. A character might be trying to speak dialogue or have a facial move derived from a player's actions and created by just a handful of artists. These requirements eventually led us to Dr. Paul Ekman's facial acting coding system, a system for taxonomizing human facial movements done back in the 1970s. It gave us a vocabulary for describing facial movements throughout our tools and code, and a target to aim for when designing our characters' faces. With it as a framework, we started a many-year process of iterating on how we built faces and heads of our characters. Where others had tried taking bits of Ekman's work, we wanted to try to use it all. That meant a lot of time spent figuring out how to do each piece within the tight performance constraints we had. But we also spent a lot of time just looking at people and faces, trying to find the extra features that would add the most value, like skin elasticity, teeth shadowing. In the end, while we weren't able to do everything we wanted, we did manage to get the pieces we thought were the most important to a convincing facial performance level on our characters.
I can't leave my father. Dog, take Gordon to the Ravenholm tunnel, then circle around and try to meet up with me. Hurry!
Facial technology. We wanted players to care about our characters, and to even have a chance at achieving that. We knew we had to invest a lot of technology for our characters' faces. It's well understood that humans are wired to pay attention to faces, subconsciously reading all kinds of information from them, so it's an extremely high bar, and if we couldn't reach it, we'd probably push players away from our characters, not towards them as we hoped. We started out doing a lot of research. It was not heartening. The best examples we could find weren't anywhere near close to being able to be run in real time, while the best real-time ones weren't close to the quality we wanted. We wanted to look as good as an animated movie, but they often took hours to render frames and were totally linear, authored by up to 100 animators, because ours had to be dynamic. A character might be trying to speak dialogue or have a facial move derived from a player's actions and created by just a handful of artists. These requirements eventually led us to Dr. Paul Ekman's facial acting coding system, a system for taxonomizing human facial movements done back in the 1970s. It gave us a vocabulary for describing facial movements throughout our tools and code, and a target to aim for when designing our characters' faces. With it as a framework.
As we finished up our work on Ravenholm, we couldn't shake the feeling that the transition from Eli's lab just wasn't working. It was far too abrupt. Eli's lab connected directly to the streets of the town where you'll be shortly, and the section you're standing in didn't exist. We had just made this promise at the end of Eli's lab: we don't go there anymore. We liked the overall build-up we created, but when the player got to Ravenholm, they were immediately dropped into combat with zombies without any room for tension building. So we built this section and the subsequent tight corridors to address that in a way we were happy with. We slowed the pacing, focused on art and lighting, got you ready to experience why we... Paint cans. Once we started to succeed at making the gravity gun and physics gameplay the core of the Ravenholm experience, we started to go through the levels and look for objects that we might have overlooked as we were busy working with the really aggressive things like saw blades and exploding canisters. One of the things we found was the paint can, and it was simple enough for us to sort of reinforce player expectations by having the paint can splatter paint on the zombies when you fire trap. This fire trap was originally intended as a visual showpiece for the fire system before a level designer repurposed it as a gameplay element for Ravenholm. It was almost cut many times during development due to the performance impact on the low-end PCs because of all the overdraw involved with the transparent sprites. In the end, there was a programmer who felt that it was important enough to the gameplay that it was worth doing the work to solve the performance issues and make sure we could get it into the game. Plaza. This open plaza is one of the areas that was fully detailed in our first development pass.
What the fuck?
We wanted to preserve as much of the existing art.
What am I missing?
A new player path that used all 3 dimensions, moving players up and down through windows.
What am I missing? Seriously.
Between buildings. It wasn't a large space, so we had to squeeze as much track out of it as possible. And since that started as an art-focused area, it was light on gameplay, and we needed to address that playtesters tended to fly right through it. And to top that off, it was already pushing our rendering and performance budget with little room left for anything new. The challenge became finding small additions to slow the player down by adding threats around corners and into every nook and cranny of the level.
I don't know, I couldn't figure out what I'm missing.
These junk-filled hallways were a simple solution to our need to slow the player down.
Wait, I'm not taking damage. I'm not taking damage during this. This is OP as fuck. What the hell?
It's tricky to stop players from just clicking through here. Luckily, having Grigori as the crazed inhabitant of Ravenholm made these setups easy to justify. It makes good sense that he clogged the stairwell to keep himself safe on the rooftops. In the end, Grigori's solution and ours were one and the same. Just throw a bunch of furniture in the way, because if it stops zombies, it'll probably slow the player down too.
Didn't really happen.
We all went to Ravenholm. When fans talk to us about Half-Life 2, Ravenholm is often the most remembered section. Thanks to its
car crushers. These car crusher lifts. Getting the car crushers to lift the player was also tricky. See, the player is always being simulated by both the physics system and the game's movement system. Each time we update the player's state, we compare the results from both systems and decide which one is right.
Jeez. It's not that deep.
Tables and bodies. Towards the end of Ravenholm's production, with all the major pieces in place, we went through and tried to fill out every bit of empty space with something interesting. In doing so, we had to be careful. Tables and bodies. Towards the end of Ravenholm's production, with all the major pieces in place, we went through and tried to fill out every bit of empty space with something interesting.
Where it showcased the player
In doing
fighting
so, we
against
had to
the
be
squad of
careful to use what we
combined
already had and not create anything
When we
new,
returned to use
as we
it
couldn't
to
risk
introduce the
introducing more
fast
bugs.
zombie, we tried to
Often,
keep as
as
much
in
of
this
the
room,
previous work
we were
as
trying to
possible.
add new moments of
We wanted
gameplay,
an
while also
iconic
adding more
one-shot
detail and
with
storytelling
zombies
to the
leaping
area.
past the moon like
Small
werewolves
scenes
to
like
draw the
this
player.
allow the player to
That scene is over.
and what it might mean
The
for what
first
they'll encounter
zombie
next.
to the player's face and send it out. It took a lot of iteration to find the right balance of
Oh, 4 damage does damage to me.
while ensuring it also worked for the gameplay goal.
Physics object consistency.
All physics objects have a variety of parameters that define their behavior: their mass, the amount of damage they take before breaking, what they break into, and so on. During development, these parameters were specified by level designers for each item, which is how most things in the game worked. But later in development, we realized we'd created a problem for ourselves. There were thousands of physics objects in the game, and no method to ensure consistency across them. As a result, a cardboard box might break apart with a single pistol shot in one level, and be completely invulnerable in another. Internally, we generally referred to these inconsistencies as level designer crimes. To fix these, and to deliver some justice, we built a system that enforced consistency on all...
I really don't understand why commentary development makes you invulnerable to damage. I don't think that's intended.
For rare edge cases where they needed to do something criminal to preserve what they'd designed.
Poison zombie introduction. Constraining the player in a tight space while providing them with a view outward is a useful way to increase the chances that they'll notice something we want them to see. Here, we draw the player's attention with the sound of a whale before the poison zombie itself becomes visible. Originally, this encounter was also the first time players faced poison head crabs, but as mentioned in an earlier node, we got far too enthusiastic in proliferating poison head crabs around the level and ended up spoiling their joint introduction.
Gamma correction. Our game engine has a rendering system that's responsible for taking the entire state of the game and calculating a color value for every pixel on your screen to represent that state. But code and software from other people are involved in the process of calculating those pixels as well. As an example, the software and hardware in your GPU are monitored. At one point during development, we were unhappy with how our characters looked. In particular, we felt that they looked waxy or sickly. Their skin was wrong. We spent some time tuning our lighting, but we just
Fucking
wanted the
letters.
characters in our world to look right. Luckily, we still had a fully featured software renderer, which allowed us to run the game without a GPU, because this was an era where many players still didn't have one. And looking at the game on that renderer, we noticed that our lighting didn't have the same problem. So we went through our code with a fine-tooth comb, trying to figure out
Poison zombie introduction.
Towards
our
the end
game
of
engine has a
Ravenholm,
rendering system
Constraining the
responsible
player
for
in a
taking
tight
What
space
is separate?
while providing them
calculating a
with
color
fill out
value for every
every
pixel on
way
your
to
screen
increase
to
the
represent
chances
that
that
state.
they'll notice something we want
in
them to
doing
see.
so, we have to be careful to use
Here,
the
we draw the
and
player's
not
attention
create
with the
anything
sound of a whale,
as you could
before the poison
Software and
zombie
hardware
itself
in your
becomes
Any weapon I can... Props?
But as mentioned in our earlier
To die already. All of you motherfuckers. What the fuck is even happening?
Still had a fully featured software renderer, which allowed us to run the game without a GPU, because this was an era where many players still didn't have
Dude! Fucking props! I take damage again now, okay.
So we went through our code with a fine-tooth comb, trying to figure out where our rendering code was doing something wrong when it was working with a GPU. After failing to do so, we tried talking to the GPU manufacturers, asking them to double-check they weren't doing anything wrong with the pixel values we were passing them. That was the start of a long journey, and long story short, it was a journey of almost 2 years of back-and-forth communication with GPU manufacturers before we were able to convince them that they were doing gamma correction incorrectly in the low-level math on their cards. During this, we'd even had to build a system that validated the color values of an individual pixel throughout the entirety of our rendering pipeline. But eventually, at the end, we finally got new drivers back from them, and our characters immediately looked like they should, matching the
When
software
we finished the
rendering.
first pass over Ravenholm, this rooftop was intended to be the culminating fight. Like other spaces in Ravenholm, it had begun life as a space purely focused on being an interesting visual location. We felt it was important that, as the player left Ravenholm, they had a moment to look back over the town they had just survived and get a glimpse of where they were headed next. Multiple gameplay groups took a shot at building a fight here, but the tight geometry and performance constraints meant we never really created a finale we were happy with. Not unlike the Half-Life saga itself, it seemed as if Ravenholm was destined to not have a real ending.
For the dead know no sleep in their graves,
So just now remember them until they are almost there, brother.
Almost there, brother. I love it. I love these fast zombies. What sort of shit they do sometimes.
Response rules. We knew early on that we wanted a lot of dynamic dialogue in-game, so we needed a system.
The real final arena. Very late in the development of Half-Life 2, when we were reviewing the entire game for final improvement opportunities, we decided we did, in fact, want a real finale for Ravenholm. The rooftop fight wasn't enough. After some discussion, we chose to add this final fight in the graveyard with Grigori alongside the player. It was risky, development-wise, but we felt the game needed it. Since we were near the end of production, we had a mature set of gameplay tools to work with, but even more importantly, by this point, we understood our own game. Making a game is often a process of learning what it is you're actually creating. Why is our game fun? How is it different? What are the most important elements? As we built the game and watched playtesters go through it, we learned answers to those questions and, in turn, got better at making it. So the graveyard came together quickly and required far less iteration than many earlier areas of the game.
Follow me. Quickly, brother.
Quickly, brother.
Where art thou, brother? Follow me, brother.
Quickly, brother.
Hurry while I hold the gate.
Route the player takes to safely navigate this mine shaft gives them plenty of time to see what's waiting for them at the bottom. And surprise, it's head crabs. Honestly, it's often head crabs. But in this case, it's poison head crabs, which are fun by themselves, but a real riot when you add fast head crabs into the mix. These two guys make a great combination. Neither is particularly dangerous on its own, but together they're...
Really now, fast head crabs are not dangerous.
Poisoned, a single hit from a fast head crab is enough to kill the player.
Okay, bro.
This is what biologists call symbiosis. At least that's what we think.
Ah. Oaks power being the same thing. It's flashlight ironic. What's the gameplay? What's the design decision behind that? Like, Gordon doesn't have legs, or he can only run if. Oaks power is everything. Oxygen, flashlight. Any developer comment on this card? Because I never use this thing, it just fucks me over if I do that. It's less fun, but yeah, I just quickly go through here. What the fuck? fuck? That's a solid thing. Gonna jump over it.
This section of game track was added late in development, after we moved Eli, Platt, and Ravenholm to come before code. While you might think
Half-Life 2's physics gave us a variety of tools to make combat more exciting. For instance, when enemies miss the player, we subtly redirect their shots toward breakable objects nearby, adding mayhem and creating that action-movie feel. We also employed physics to add hints. We created what we called ragdoll magnets across the game to make enemy corpses fall in interesting and dramatic ways.
Why does it need me to lock into this view to explain things? Stupid shit.
Snipers. The Half-Life 2 team was never very large, so we were always looking for ways to create new gameplay.
Oh!
Snipers. The Half-Life 2 team was never very large, so we were always looking for ways to create new gameplay without high asset and production costs. The sniper is a great example. It has no actual model, just a laser beam, so it required no art or animation support. Dies, it simply spawns.
Can you? Fuck!
It out the window.
I have to crouch.
Despite that simplicity, we got a lot of unique gameplay from it. We were especially happy with how it interacted with the physics objects in the game world. Players are used to exploiting explosive objects near enemies, so it felt fitting to have an enemy that flipped that dynamic when
Missed 3 times in a row. Any developer comments here? They're pretty useful here. Get over here. What the fuck? I can't move. What the fuck? Dude, why can't I move? Oh my god! What is this shit? I picked up that shitter and I wasn't able to move. This didn't end up working the way I wanted it to work. And I can walk.
Who's hurt?
Okay, you still hear the sniper.
Gordon Freeman. It's incredible you made it. We've been getting communication from Alex. I'll see if I can reach her again. Follow me. It's Leon. We're all clear. And I've got Gordon Freeman.
Freeman, you're kidding. Look, I've been on the line with Alex.
Her father's been captured.
Over here, Dr. Freeman.
The Eli Vance is indispensable to the operation.
Alex, it's Leon, and I've got Gordon Freeman with me.
Gordon, you made it to Ravenholm, thank God. I need your help. They've taken my father. He's been taken to Nova Prospect. The Vortigon's tracked the ship that made off with him and Judith Mossman. While the trains are still running, I'm gonna hitch a ride. Here's where you come in, Gordon. I need you to make your way along the coast until you get to Nova Prospect. It used to be a high-security prison. It's something much worse than that now. But I think it's still easier to sneak in than to break out.
You wanted to take the coast road? You won't last 5 minutes on foot. It's spawning season for the antlions.
That's why I called you, Leon. I was hoping you still had the scout car we left with you last summer. The one my dad rigged with the Tau cannon.
Yeah, good idea. Hold on a sec. Norco, bring the buggy out. Put it on the dock right now. Gordon Freeman will be driving it.
Will do. I just finished mounting an ammo crate on the back.
Good timing. Okay, Alex, we're all set.
Gordon, I haven't driven the coast in over a year, but I have no reason to think it's gotten any safer. Meet me in the depot where the trains unload. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in Nova Prospect. Bye for now.
Bye, Alex. Okay, Doc. Before you hit the road, you might want to grab some med kits. Restock on
Coast kickoff. This interstitial scene came along late in development to connect Ravenholm to Coast. Noticing a trend? Quite Coast kickoff. This interstitial scene
Buggy
came
model.
along late in development.
The buggy's
to connect
model
Ravenholm
went through
to
many
Coast.
iterations before
Noticing
reaching
a
its
trend?
final version.
Quite a bit of
We
the
cycled
tech
through
used in
designs
our
that
games.
satisfied
Yeah,
both
they
artistic and
removed the
physical
hood,
needs,
I think.
but then hit an
Wherever
unexpected
possible.
issue.
We didn't even have time to
When I played the beta
Us
mod, it
users
looked way
who
different.
experienced
These kinds of
FPS
scenes
players
are always
were
a
getting
challenge
motion
to make
sick while
control.
First, I
driving.
didn't even like notice the difference, but
Along
yeah,
with
it's
some simulation
glaring.
tests, we
What
discovered that
happens when
altering the buggy
NPCs are
model
treated
helped.
like signposts
The more
without
the
It
model
dropped me
obscured
already.
the world,
them
the
or the
worse
scene.
the motion sickness
The
became.
result is a forgettable moment.
So we
where the
began
game's
stripping away
scenes
parts of the
change.
model, removing more.
That's the
Buggy
nature of
training course.
development. You only
This
have
training
so much
section
time.
was designed to
You
let the
have
player
decide
play around
what
with their
to
buggy.
do.
At the time
Fire's
Half-Life
Lab
2 was
and
released,
Eli's
this
Lab
level of
were
physical
much more
simulation in the vehicle was
important,
novel,
so that's where we
so we
focused
wanted to
our
give players
emphasis.
ample opportunity to experiment with it. The player has also just left the tight confines of Ravenholm. We liked giving them the contrasting reward of being able to move quickly through a large space, feeling safe inside a vehicle. We made sure to require a turbo jump to get out of this area, which doubled as a test to make sure they'd reached a level of comfort in their driving, and also ensured that they didn't leave their buggy behind.
Yeah, because they made it a punishment. If you leave it behind, then it gives you a mission failed prompt or whatever it's called in this game.
Transition tunnels. Building the coast required us to develop a way to handle level transition. We moved from one level to
Sober driving be like.
Coast. We wanted a wide open section of the game for the buggy, but we still needed a way to constrain the player's movement. Choosing a coastline gave us a natural boundary along one side of the map while still feeling open and expansive. It also helped visualize the effects of the Combine's extraction of Earth's resources. Playtesters still tried to swim out to sea, so we added leeches to deter them.
Grenade House. A lot of a Half-Life game is about giving players slightly novel combat experiences around each corner, even if they're just small tweaks on previous ones. They don't all have to be skill-based challenges. Sometimes they can just be fun moments where the player gets to enjoy themselves. This Grenade House is one of those moments, with the twist being that we've inverted the usual setup. Instead of letting the player drop grenades on enemies below, we've put the enemies above. The unlimited grenade box is a somewhat clumsy way to encourage players to engage with the scenario, but its invulnerability also ensures the players can still climb up to the floor above, even if they've blown up everything else.
Antlion design. In some of the earliest design work for the game, we had plans for multiple core alien races, with the Combine being just one of them. One of the other races was a religious insectoid species,
What is...
and antlions were part of that.
Funny.
Later, as we developed Coast, we started viewing them more as pests that came through the Zen portals, along with head crabs and other creatures. While they aren't actually from Zen, they infest the corners of any world they enter, a lot like cockroaches.
Buggy birds. In one memorable Coast playtest, a player returned to their vehicle after exploring a house and happened to see a bird flying past. They yelled at the bird, telling it to stay away from the buggy, complaining that birds often foul up their cars in real life. In our post-playtest discussion, we realized that this was the first time we'd had objects separate from the player that the player actually cared about. We saw it as an opportunity to explore, so we built a system to deliver the moment that playtesters seek. When the player leaves their buggy alone for a while, and is out of sight, we spawn a seagull at a random location on the vehicle frame. As time goes on, the seagull spawns poop decals on the car body beneath it, and continues until the player returns, at which point it flies away. Naturally, playtesters wanted to be able to clean their vehicle, so we added the ability to wash the car by driving it into shallow water. It was later.
Dude, how do I not know about this? They can poop on your car, what the fuck?
One of those cases where we know only a small percentage of players will discover it. But if we can implement these kind of details efficiently and have enough of them, most players will encounter at least one.
The rocket launcher is our best bet for taking down a gunship. Ah, hello. I'll be right with you. Now, where was I? Ah, yes. Using the laser guide, you can steer your rocket past the gunship's defenses and prevent it from shooting down your rocket. This will only anger it at first, but if you can survive long enough to make several direct hits, you'll be rewarded with a prize worthy of any mantelpiece. Now, who's going to be the lucky one to carry it into combat? Ah, yes, Gordon Freeman. I couldn't have asked for a finer volunteer. Colonel Odessa Cubbage at your service.
Flying vehicle audio. The large flying enemies in the game present a unique audio challenge. During combat, they're much more mobile than other enemies, and they often move a significant distance away from the player. They're also really dangerous if they have line of sight. So these factors led us to focus on audio solutions specifically around occlusion. In other words, when you can see the enemy and when the enemy can see you. And we wanted to make a clear audio distinction between when they have that line of sight. So the flying vehicle engine sounds are made up of multiple looping sounds that we play simultaneously.
Easy.
And some of those loops are processed by the DSP system based on the space you're in, while others are played directly and unprocessed. So the DSP system adds more of an environment echoing effect when we run sound through that system. So when the flying object is...
They fucked up with this.
can't see you,
I'm sure this is not intentional. If it is, then it's really broken.
And it sounds like that object is a little more...
Sure, it's... Yeah. It's not a normal playthrough if you do this, but still. What on earth?
So that overall just gives you a sense that the sound is either distant and directionless or more directly in your line of sight. And you can sort of hear it when, you know, when a helicopter emerges from behind a building. Ideally, you can really hear that difference.
Laser-guided RPG. The laser guidance feature of the RPG was a huge headache for us because it was difficult to teach. Many playtesters would fire the RPG and then immediately duck behind cover, which meant they didn't see the rocket's flight path. Even worse, they didn't realize the rocket was now turning around to fly back at them. We tried various HUD elements
Finally.
and about indicators to help, but found that most players overlooked them, focusing on the enemy instead. We made as many small improvements as we could, like emphasizing the feature in Odessa's speech and enhancing the audio and visuals around how the gunship shoots down direct RPG shots. While these changes helped some players grasp the feature,
We wanted the buggy to be more than just a means of travel, so we decided to attach a gun to it. We chose the Tau Cannon, a Half-Life 1 weapon we liked but hadn't found a place for it in Half-Life 2. The Tau Cannon can shoot through walls, which makes it tricky for level design, so we limited it to the coast section. Once you introduce wall-penetrating weapons, level design becomes much tougher. Furthermore, we mounted an ammunition crate on the back of the buggy, giving the player unlimited SMG.
Crane. Took a lot of fine-tuning to get right. Something that needed to generate so much physical force was always Whisky, given the limitations of our rigid body physics and discussion technology. For example, the magnet was never going to fully meet player expectations for something with that much mass. But because the crane was stationary, we could carefully choose everything within its range and fine-tune as needed. Fortunately, most players didn't seem to notice its rougher edges, likely because of the sheer novelty of interacting with something like it in a vaguely realistic physics environment.
Fuck yeah. So weird. Fuck. No. Where's the buggy? Where is it? Dude, I can't see it. I legit can't fucking see it. Hopefully it's still up there. I mean, it's not down there, so just that. The crane is a good part of this game. Oh, there it is. It's just blocked off by this. X fucking D, guys. X fucking D, guys. X fucking D, guys. Almost flew into it. Oh, this is good.
Opportunistic moment. Some memorable moments in the game come from the interactions of multiple game systems. Sometimes we realize these moments are likely to happen in real life. When that's the case, we often wish more players would experience them. There's a tension here. The more we know players will encounter something, the more effort we can put in it. But if it feels too artificial, the moment can come across as forced, and players may not respond as positively. The gunship cinematic death is an example where we nudge things a bit, trying to increase the chances of a memorable moment without being too obvious. The design of this area and the gunship's flight path make it likely that the player and the gunship are in the right spot.
Shit, what the fuck is... Why is this spinning out so much?
Roller mines.
Roller mines were created to fill the need for an enemy that could threaten players while driving the buggy. Since the player in the buggy was essentially a fully physically simulated entity, we thought it would be interesting to also have a physically simulated enemy. The manhack had already shown us how this approach could lead to an enemy with lots of interesting interactions with the world. So we built the roller mine, a ball whose movement is entirely driven by generating torque on itself, and iterated on its behavior until it was fun to drive again. Roller mines aren't particularly dangerous to the buggy, but if you let them stack up, they can become a problem.
Yeah, I can see this.
We also made sure they worked well when the player's on foot, allowing level designers to get a few extra encounters out of them.
Oh fuck. But that's what you get, I guess. Standing around.
Crossbow. This is the player's first opportunity to get the crossbow in the game, and looking back, it's somewhat surprising we didn't gate it. It's entirely possible for the player to drive right past it. To make that less likely, we set up the roadblock and vantage point to encourage players to get out of the buggy, at which point they'd spot the crossbow and item crate. I guess it shows that almost every player stops being elected a weapon, but this is a case where the difference between playtesting and real play might matter. A playtester has been playing since the start of Coast may not be as fatigued with exploration.
Gas station. We had grand plans for this encounter. We envisioned building a gas station the player would fight around, likely igniting the gas tanks and setting fire to everything. We imagined the player driving away from a raging fire, but budget and performance were harsh constraints in 2003, and the station had to keep getting smaller and simpler to fit into Coast's large levels. Our plans for a dynamic fire system didn't materialize, and building it no longer made sense. There's always
In Half-Life 1 and much of Half-Life 2, the world consisted mainly of enclosed tunnels and corridors, which worked well with a binary space partition, or BSP tree. Essentially, this tech allowed us to quickly sort through the geometry and determine what might be visible in the player's view. But the open areas of Coast and other outdoor sections didn't suit that approach, so we needed to move tech. Area portals were one, allowing us to carve out the world into discrete chunks separated by portals. Doors and windows, that is, not after the time. We also developed an additional moving system, which basically said that if the player can't see through, over, or around a large object, don't render what's on the other side. This might seem an obvious thing not to do, but it takes some work to make sure that calculating what's on the other side of the big thing isn't slow.
The bridge. This bridge section was inspired by the Deception Pass Bridge, just up the road from Valve's office. We initially built this section as a pure navigation puzzle. The bridge. This bridge section was inspired by the Deception Pass Bridge, just up the road from Valve's office. We initially built this section as a pure navigation.
Dude, why am I so bad?
The bridge. This bridge section was inspired by the Deception Pass Bridge, just up the road from Valve's office. We initially built this section as a pure navigation puzzle, gradually layering more gameplay into it. It also became the primary test case for our players' edge friction. In our movement system, we subtly increase friction on the player's deceleration as they approach the edge of the surface. Players have never noticed it, likely because it aligns naturally with their goal of stopping at the edge to look down, matching human tendency to move more slowly and carefully near its The bridge. This bridge section was inspired by the Deception Pass Bridge, just up the road from Valve's office. We initially built this section as a pure navigation puzzle, gradually layering more gameplay into it.
What the fuck? easy. Yeah, this button. Thanks, Setcab, for ruining the rhythm. What the fuck? What the fuck? Why does it toss me? I just have to take this slow. What the fuck is this? Is so weird.
We were particularly happy with the gunship. Despite it being
What else did they change that wasn't in the patch notes? This is dumb as fuck.
Bridge playtesting. The bridge section was always a high point in playtests, with testers consistently having strong reactions to it. The tension they felt while slowly making their way over the girders was visible in their movements. Over time, we layered more challenges into the traverse, and playtests only became more entertaining to watch. From the train rumbling across the bridge and shaking the player, to a surprise head crab in a shack that seemed like a safe haven midway through, we did feel a little guilty relishing the playtesters' visible stress, but we weren't total monsters. After players made it across the bridge, they breathed a sigh of relief, disabled the combine shield, and then realized they had to return across the underside. Concerned they might be bored on the second trip, we decided to add a gunship to keep them company out in the girders.
But yeah, we are not monsters.
In Half-Life 1 and much of Half-Life 2, the world consisted mainly of enclosed tunnels and corridors, which worked well with a binary space partition, or BSP tree. Essentially, this tech allowed us to quickly sort through the geometry and determine
terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help visualize it, imagine they can't see and are constantly waving a stick in front of themselves to check if the way is clear. The performance cost of these probes increases with the complexity of the world geometry. Our terrain displacement system creates uneven surfaces using many polygons, far more than the perfectly flat floor.
I love how dumb this is.
Terrain and performance. Our
This
performance
section
budget
in the
was
game.
often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces.
This should be faster than the
When
train.
NPCs move, they perform many small spatial
Easily.
probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help visualize it, imagine they can't
Yep,
see
okay,
and are
this
constantly
side
waving a
worked.
stick in front of themselves to check if the way is clear. The performance cost of these probes increases with the complexity of the world geometry.
Where are you going, you fuck?
Terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help visualize it, imagine they can't see and are constantly waving a stick.
Dude.
Terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help visualize it, imagine
This always tosses me there. Fucking
Our
amazing.
performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path.
This is dumb.
Terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces.
It's doable. It's doable.
They perform many small spatial
Fuck this trade. Fuck this trade, man.
Terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path. To help visualize it, imagine they can't see.
Dude, it barely touched me. I remember this being the easiest fucking thing in Half-Life. Wonder what happened. I mean, even on the Steam version this happens constantly, but the first version of Half-Life I just played, or I played back then. Fuck this.
Terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to terrain and performance.
I'm not giving up.
Our performance
I don't
budget
care.
was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move,
It's doable, this game is just
small
bad.
spatial probes to determine if they can
Dude, I didn't even destroy it.
and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely
Fuck you.
terrain and performance. Our performance budget was often a significant constraint when it came to combat, and even more so for combat on terrain surfaces. When NPCs move, they perform many small spatial probes to determine if they can safely navigate their chosen path.
Finally.
To help visualize it, imagine they can't see.
That's how I do this
constantly
shit.
waving a stick in front of themselves to check if the way is clear. The performance cost of these probes increases with the complexity of the world.
Ramming zombies with the buggy. As human beings, we have expectations for our physical world, as mentioned a few times in this commentary. One of those expectations is, if you hit a zombie with your car, it should get absolutely booted into the air. But getting this effect in-game isn't as straightforward as it is in the real world. For performance reasons, enemies like the zombie use a simplified collision box during gameplay. This is a box that fits snugly around the zombie with no part of the model sticking out. But when the zombie dies, it's converted into a ragdoll with more accurate per-limb collision boxes.
What the fuck? Idiots.
This change in collision representation adds further complexity when you ram a zombie with the buggy, beyond just the frame hitch. When the buggy first collides with the zombie, it touches the zombie's simplified collision box. The game then kills the zombie, converting it into a ragdoll that the physics system begins to simulate. Now, with more accurate per-limb collision, the closest part of the zombie may be several inches away from the buggy. As a result, the next time the physics system simulates, the zombie starts falling from gravity, because the buggy is no longer pushing it. While it's only a short moment before the buggy reaches the zombie again, this small discrepancy made ramming zombies unsatisfying. They often fell out of the player's view. To fix this, we saved the force the zombie...
D2, Coast 9. Late in Coast development, we reached a point where our game code was far enough ahead of our level design that our gameplay programmers were looking for more code to write and new tasks that could help Half-Life 2 ship. This was largely due to the demands of Coast levels, which placed a heavy burden on our level designers with their sheer scale and extensive train usage. As a result, our gameplay programmers began designing smaller scale encounters. Later, when our level designers caught up, they created this level by stitching together 3 separate encounters from the programmers and performing all the necessary finishing work to prepare it for release.
Fuck you. Then I do this. Fucking invincible fuck.
Density of objects in Half-Life 2's gameplay stages. We thought it would be interesting how the players search for a specific item, especially if there was some obvious where it might be found. This way, players could locate the item either through careful observation and deduction.
Dude, what is this? Where are they?
Since we already had models for cars and batteries, it was a natural step to create a small junkyard for players to explore. We also hid a couple of extra batteries in unexpected places for the players who chose the brute force method. As with other item-based puzzles, this one needed a fail-safe in case players lost the batteries.
So what is up there?
Over the cliff if you want to see what happens.
Dude, I don't want the bad frame. Get in there. I think I get to know a prospect and I end the stream.
They're looking for your car. Get your car in the garage. Okay, Doc. You'll have to go on foot from here. There's a secret
Performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we envisioned a big finale where the player and a squad of citizens would hold out against waves of combined soldiers, culminating in a gunship battle. Performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we envisioned a performance constraints. For the final performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we envisioned a big finale where the player and a squad of citizens would hold out against waves of combined performance constraints. Performance constraints. Performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, performance constraints. For the final performance constraints. Performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we envisioned a big finale where the player performance constraints. For the final Coast performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we performance constraints.
Dude, you can't stop me.
For the final Coast Arena, performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, performance constraints. Performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, performance constraints. For the final Coast Arena, we envisioned a big finale where the player and a squad of citizens would hold out against waves of combined soldiers, culminating in a gunship battle. Unfortunately, the computational cost of having soldiers and friendly allies moving around on terrain meant that the
Lamau.
Finest mind of his generation. Here is another small interstitial scene that ended up working well. The only requirement for this moment was to teach the player to stay off the sand. The prior scenes, we were still focused on simply making them functional. But by the time we got to this one, we were becoming more comfortable and started enjoying the process of putting extra thought into those moments. In doing so, we pushed the characters beyond being mere signposts, creating something more interesting and entertaining. After release, Laszlo went on.
Floor is lava. Building gameplay around broadly understood concepts like the floor is lava made training it easy. We liked how our physics system allowed for a high degree of creative freedom in how players chose to tackle. Some built walkways out of many objects, while others focused on using just their two favorite sheets of metal. Some carefully follow the path up in the rocks, concerned about falling, while others move directly towards the exit, perch on objects just above the sand. Playstyles vary. Some players consider it a failure if they summon endlines, reloading immediately, while others enjoy scrambling back from the rocks to recover. We also like that it functions as a navigation puzzle, but could be turned into an arena if players prefer. Some just jump onto the sand and fought their way to the end.
Extraction. This arena presented some tricky design problems for a couple reasons. First, the guard is a melee-only enemy, so we couldn't allow the player to reach areas where the guard couldn't follow. We did experiment with a few range attacks, but didn't like the result. Its goose-spitting attack, for instance, ended up looking ridiculous. The only non-melee attack that survived was its ability to bash physics objects at the player. This required objects to be in range, which isn't possible. The second challenge was ensuring that no matter where the guard dies, the Vortigaunt can reach its course. This was essential as the game can't proceed if the Vortigaunt is unable to extract the bug bait.
The Freeman would do wise to develop the Myrmidon's aromatic pheropods. The process is not entirely hygienic, therefore the Freeman will have need of these pheropods on the paths ahead. Gather them now.
In rare cases, players could find themselves unable to kill the antlion guard in this arena. This would happen if they ran out of ammo or had misused all of the available physics objects, leaving nothing to launch with the gravity gun. To address this, we added a citizen on the mounted turret above the gate as a failsafe, allowing the stuck player to rely on a citizen to kill the guard.
That shit's funny.
Freeman must excuse us. It is.
Gallalong. I wish Vortigaunt's were real, man.
Keep going, Dr. Freeman. Nova Prospect is just ahead. A man with a pack of antlions. Well, that's a different story.
Gallalong.
The Freeman honors us by his presence. Follow Freeman.
Actually interested about this.
Bug bait training. This clumsy bug bait training is where we landed, having run out of time, but needing players to understand the tool for Nova Prospect's design to work. Generally, we aim to add enough flavor and context to training so it doesn't feel like training. It feels like a natural part of discovering something new. Here, though, we didn't quite manage that. As obvious as it may seem, bug bait wasn't something players intuitively grasped. We're well into the game now, so players have plenty of experience dealing with enemies. Before we added any training, the first playtesters who collected bug bait entered the next level and instinctively shot the first antlion they saw, because that had been working up until then. Half-Life tends to encourage a shoot first, ask questions later approach. Similarly, when players reached Nova Prospect, they didn't think to throw bug bait at the Combine soldiers and instead relied on their usual weapons. So, we needed this training not only to show how bug bait works, but also to demonstrate that antlions would be close to the player without attacking.
The Freeman shows his excellence in all things. And now this one must bid the Freeman farewell. Nova Prospect lies just beyond. Remember well what you have learned here. The Eli Vance has greatest confidence in you.
The Eli Vance. Wait, I'm not off the Nova Prospect just yet.
Thumper Final Stage. We liked the final stage of Thumpers, where their purpose is inverted. Now, instead of serving as a tool for safety, they act as a blocker for the player's antlion army. However, we probably should have incorporated more thorough Thumper training before this.
Assault on Nova Prospect. With an infinitely respawning antlion army on a coastline assaulting a fortified combine base, it was hard not to try a Normandy-inspired level. Our initial prototype featured trenches leading up to Nova Prospect, with lethal machine guns forcing the player and their antlions to stay within the trenches to survive. It was thrilling to have machine gun fire and leaping antlions constantly passing.
Yes! Oh, great and mighty Grand Champion! Is there something you need? Can I carry your weapon? Shine your boots? Suck on your nipples, perhaps?
However, the mounted guns remained, as their lethality proved useful in encouraging players to rely on their antlions.
Dude, what am I stuck on? What the hell?
Prospect Yard. The combat throughout the Nova Prospect Yard was largely inspired by our early observations of antlions fighting combine soldiers. The antlions' high mobility and melee attacks paired well with the soldiers' range lethality and vulnerability up close. Antlions look great under fire, with particle effects flying everywhere, and when they finally reach a soldier, the resulting ragdoll effect is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah, there's a second one. Another difficulty. No way. And I saved on it. Lovely. What a shitter. And there was the invincibility power up, by the way.
Magic wall. Like many of our combat arenas, we needed a gate of some kind to prevent players from moving on before they finished this fight. Unfortunately, we were out of time and had to move on to the train station, so we ended up with this bit of magical bullshit. A wall that just explodes after the second gunship is defeated, revealing the way forward. We reassured ourselves that most players wouldn't notice, as they'd be busy fighting the gunships, and our playtesting had shown that generally they all finished the fight before they reached this point. With enough explosions throughout the arena, the destroyed, burning wall felt pretty natural, so we threw in a couple of simple gas puzzles on the other side to justify it. But no, we're not exactly proud of it.
Okay. Okay, Nova Prospect, I end it here. See you guys next time.